Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandra Ken, coordinator of the Los Angeles Area Chamber Foundation. Thank you so much for joining our RETAP workshop today. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes for to allow folks to trickle in. Before, just a few quick housekeeping items before we get started. The session is being recorded, and the recording along with the slide decks will be shared with you after the workshop. Also, we kindly ask that you stay on mute during the presentation and hold your questions until our Q&A sessions at the end. And lastly, we'd like to know who's here, so please do drop your name and company name in the chat when you get a chance. We have a great session lined up today. As a reminder, feel free to jot your questions and save them for our Q&A session. Thank you for being here again. With that, I'll pass the floor to Maurice and we'll start reading.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Welcome, everybody. This is the 7th workshop in the series. We've come a long way. And the 7th workshop now, after covering, how to export, where to find the best markets, how to get into those markets, complying with regulations, getting paid. It's now time to deliver the goods. So this session will cover 3 aspects of actually delivering the goods, assuming by now you have a purchase order and you're ready to go. So that's what we'll cover. I want to turn it over to Simona Rasek, our Client Relations Manager, for a few comments about next steps.
Good morning, everyone. Sandra, could you please give me permission to share my screen?
Yeah, you should be able to share your screen at the moment.
Great. Are you able to see my screen with the navigating RETAP page? Yes?
No.
No? You're not seeing my screen?
I can see it.
I can see it.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for workshop 7 in the RETAP series. It's really hard to believe that we are near the end of the journey in the educational workshops. However, the work is just now starting. Over the past several weeks, you've gained valuable insights from our experts on key topics ranging from market research and compliance and AI. And today, it's really going to continue to build on the foundation. We have really great experts talking to us about important topics in the international trade transactions. Always remember to ask questions. This is also time for you to engage with the speakers. And I'm going to just give you again a reminder of the work we have to do together. If you have been attending the workshops but have not registered for the actual RETAP program, I just want to remind you of the registration QR code and the website link underneath. If you are inviting anybody else to join the last workshop next week, to the right, you have the QR code where you could share with those who would like to participate in the last workshops. The last workshop next week is going to be more of a Q&A process. Once you register for the RETAP program, make sure to also complete the export needs. It makes it easier for us to understand where you are in the export development journey. And a quick reminder that we basically have 3 different tracks for the program. We have the RETAP 101, which is for new to export companies. So if you are in operation for a year and you at least 1 year and you are officially registered with the state of California to do business in California, and your products and services are 51% made in the US, and there is a formula to determine that if you're not sure. You're new to export and you have a functional website, you will be part of the RETAP 101. Again, you do have to register on the RETAP website for you to become part of the RETAP 101 track. And you will be working with Program Manager Maurice Kogan on understanding the resources, the next steps, and how to better prepare to start the export journey. And making sure that you've had access to all of the educational webinars. They're all listed on the website, so you can go back and revisit some of them as needed. Track 2 is reserved for, we call it RETAP 201, and it is reserved for companies that are new to markets. They have been exporting already to 1, 2, 3 markets, and now they're looking to expand into new foreign markets or to increase their market share in the existing market. You still have to be in operation for a year at least to be officially registered with the state of California. Products and services must be 51%. And again, having a functional website is important in order to present your products or services, and you have already exported to at least a couple markets before. Then we also have the NASBITE CGBP training for aspiring freight forwarders and aspiring export management companies, or for export managers in companies who would like to understand more and would like to have these professional certification. I will give you the QR code to register in the next slide. So the CGBP stands for Certified Global Business Professional, and it is a credential that is widely recognized in the international trade professional world. It has been taken by over 2,000 global business professionals in the US. I am a CGBP professionals, and it really gives you a more in-depth knowledge in business management, global marketing, supply chain management, trade finance as well. So if you would like to take your global knowledge to the next level, make sure that you scan this QR code and you register. And if you like to learn more about who NASBITE is, what kind of organizations, you can just go to nasbite.org to learn more. So this is an additional program we offer through RETAP to boost your international career. Now, if you have applied for any of the tracks, 101 or 201 or the CGBP, you will be receiving a RETAP participation agreement from Peter Fu at the LA Chamber. So either track that you'll be part of, you must send us an email and make sure that you sign the participation agreement. This agreement allows us to move to the next step. We have talked about the export readiness assessment in I think workshop number 2, if you like to go back and learn more about it. But going to this website, tradecomplianceinstitute.org, and going under the Export Startup Kit and taking the export readiness assessment is mandatory to move forward into one of the tracks. So again, you can go back to workshop 2 if you want to learn more about it. But if you have not taken the export readiness assessment, now this week is the time for you to do so. Everybody in RETAP 101 track will be mentored by our program manager, Maurice Kogan. So make sure that you are connected with Maurice. His email is here on this slide. So if you have not talked to Maurice recently, make sure that you are connected with Maurice, because this is where the work starts from here on. Those who have already exported, please make sure that you are connected with me. And this is an email I set up only for this program, jdtstrade@gmail.com, so I don't miss any email. And we will be discussing your current business needs. We'll be discussing programs that are available for your export promotion, for your export growth. And we will refer you to I will be referring you, those in 201, to our international marketing research global trade expert, Dr. Sarita Jackson, will be working with you to build and develop a global market research report, looking at where is the demand for your products or services in a global market, which market based on specific data analysis and specific data that helps to make such decisions, which markets are the best markets for your products at the current geopolitical current moment in time in the international trade. So those part of the 201 track, after you meet with me, you will be sent to Dr. Sarita Jackson to develop the report. And then we will discuss referrals to our action group members, which is our ecosystem of support in Los Angeles area, in Orange County areas, and really in California, from SBA to AXIM to U.S. Commercial Service to the new economics for women to really Pacific Asian Consortium in, employment to PACE to WIT OC. These are only a few of the action group members who are there to support with resources and program available to help your export growth. One of the benefit and one of the great support we have in the 201 track is that you will have access to export promotion services provided by the U.S. Commercial Service in specific markets where these programs are available. So we, the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce, through the RETAP program, will offset U.S. Commercial Service fees for export promotion services to support finding a distributor, a buyer, a partner in a foreign market. Now, these services are really subject to availability and eligibility as determined by the U.S. Commercial Service specialist. So you will have to first meet with me. Then we are going to meet with Richard Swanson, who's our point of contact for this program, and determine which of these programs is available for your company in a specific market where we have foreign service specialist available. And through a participation agreement that you sign, the Los Angeles Chamber will be paying for the services for you to locate a distributor. So this is really the end of the work we did together, is that you are ready now for a U.S. Commercial Service program. Mm-hmm. And that is the work that we have ahead from now until about the end of August. This is the kind of work we'll do together. So make sure that you are connected. If you have not applied for the program, it's the QR code to the left. For the CGPP training, use the QR code to the right. I assume you're already in the workshop register for the middle QR code. And please make sure, if you know that you are 101, you have not exported, make sure you're connected with Maurice so you have access to additional resources he will be able to provide to you, mentorship and referrals. And if you have exported before, products or services, you must have a meeting with me. So send me an email, let's connect, and let's start the work. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and I'm handing it back to Sandra.
To me.
Yes, to you, Maurice.
This is Maurice Kogan. I'm the program manager. If you remember in one of the very early workshops, I said there are a lot of similarities between exporting and domestic selling, but there are also differences. And one of the major differences is documentation. There's a lot of documentation involved in the export side that you don't face when you're selling domestically. So that's a very important part now, so as not to scare you about all of this documentation that you're going to hear about from our first speaker, a freight forwarder is the one that can help navigate you through a lot of this documentation. You don't have to be your own documentarian or whatever you want to call it. You should utilize the freight forwarder's ability to not only advise you what these documents are, but help you prepare them and in fact prepare them themselves often. So our first topic is export documentation. And our first speaker is Nate Ward. Nate is Vice President of NASBITE, which is the organization behind the CGBP. He's a CGBP himself. He's operates out of Cleveland State University. He runs an Ohio State network of SBDCs in Ohio. So I've known him for a number of years as a fellow board member of NASBITE. I heard him talk about this topic, and I said, well, he's the guy I'd like to have to cover this topic. So Nate, take it over.
Great. Thank you so much, Maurice. Sandra, thanks for the invitation to the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce for this opportunity. As Maurice mentioned, I have been a longtime CGBP, a member of NASBITE. Prior to that, I did a lot of this stuff. I worked in private sector. I worked for a couple of manufacturers, and at various points in my career, I was responsible for dealing with, the headache, if you want to call it that, but this whole process of documentation. So this is a topic that I know very well, and I'm happy to guide everyone through what all of this means as you're looking to prepare your export journey. I think I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see. Okay. So I'll do my best to monitor the chat, but Maurice and Sandra, I don't know if you'll also have an ability to monitor along with what questions come in, but I'll try to do my best to make this as practical and informative as possible. And I'll start my little timer here to make sure they've given me 45 minutes to talk, and I don't want to go over that time. Okay, so yeah, that's who I am. Trade advisor within the Small Business Development Center network of the state of Ohio. I run the Global Business Center here at my host, Cleveland State University. And as a trade advisor for the last 13 years, my role has been to assist small to medium-sized companies that are looking to understand how international trade works, how to get involved in international trade, how to accelerate their export success. I run a couple of accelerators here in Ohio and have worked with companies across a multitude of industries, most of whom are manufacturers, but others are importer exporters. It's really been fun to understand the the specifics of everyone's export journey, depending on what country they want to go to, what they're trying to sell. If it's a service, I've had people wanting to sell security services all the way up to things that explode, defense materials. So I want to share with you a little bit about all that experience in this introduction today. So what we're talking about, this is actually a slice of a CGBP training that I do. So twice a year, I run a boot camp. Most recently with Gabe, the other speaker who's going to join later, at the national conference, which happened to be here in Cleveland. Earlier this month, we co-hosted a CGBP training boot camp. And so this is the section about international documentation specifically. I want to set a couple of basis points here. So the first thing I want to kind of set the table on is answering the question of who governs an international sales transaction. In the US, we have what's called the Uniform Commercial Code. It's the commercial law of the United States. And this is something that's determined by Congress. And the point behind this is we have really well-defined points that describe when a transaction has been completed between two different parties. And as you can imagine, when there's a dispute, when there's some disagreement about what did you offer, what did you give me, what were those terms, we have a pretty well ironed out system that dictates, when the sale has happened, who's responsible for what. But things get a lot messier in international. There's a broad term called lex mercatoria. Lex mercatoria is a fancy Latin term that really just means the sum total of all international agreements, conventions, and trade customs. So it's going to be determined on a case-by-case basis of what country are we talking about, what has been their history of involvement with agreeing to different agreements and being part of different treaties, and then how does that relate to the other country where the two different businesses are based. So a lot of those could entail agreements from the World Trade Organization, the United Nations, free trade agreements, other conventions that they could have signed on. The closest thing that approximates the Uniform Commercial Code internationally is the UN Convention on the International Sale of Goods, the UNCISG. It was adopted in 1980 by over 60 countries. It represents over two-thirds of world trade. And the US has partially adopted the CISG. Why do I bring up this background? It's first of all to reinforce that it's an uneven kind of set of circumstances, let me explain it maybe in a different way. That the Commercial Code of the United States, in order for transactions to be agreed upon, we have a an unspoken agreement about when two parties have agreed to something, that you could order a pizza over the phone or something, and that can constitute a contract, that both sides have implicitly understood what the intentions were of the others. And that's the basis for, like, okay, that both of you have signaled that you wanted this agreement to go forward. Under the CISG, because of all the differences between countries, there's a strong emphasis that the contract between two parties needs to be explicit, and it needs to be agreed upon in writing at 100% agreement at all levels in order for that agreement to be considered bound. And really, that's to set up the foundation of everything else we're going to talk about. One of the reasons why there is so much detail and so much put into documentation is to create a very explicit environment where both parties are very clear about what one wants and the other one is offering. And that's really what I think drives your understanding of, like, why is there so much headache? Why is there so much perceived paperwork? It's to make sure that it's ultra clear for both parties. And this is something that, from a US perspective, sometimes we don't always appreciate, that the information that goes into our documents, there's a lot of just mutual understanding or assumptions that are built into it, facets that are just fine for a transaction between Arizona and California. But when you're talking about from California to Argentina, it's going to be very different. Okay, a couple other things, and this is just to understand, like, how a couple other things operate. The electronic data interchange. So this is the electronic exchange of documents from computer to computer. This is the format of how information travels from one customs location to another in a different country. They use this electronic data interchange. This is more like a glossary term, but that's the foundational network that computers from one country to another country work in customs. The In the United States, we have something called electronic export information, or EEIs. In the US, we collect information through the automated export system when you're filing and export paperwork. This is, again, another glossary term, but if you're the person that's going to be filling out customs paperwork, which in all likelihood you probably won't be, you have the right to do this if you're the exporter of record. Very often, companies are going through a third party. If you're shipping something through FedEx or UPS or DHL, they are putting this information on your behalf. You'll have to sign over some information, some forms to them saying that you're allowing them to do this, but they're filing something to the U.S. government and they're going into the automated export system. And there's just a catch here that anything that is going to be going overseas, if you've already looked over your Schedule B codes, you understand what that term means. If the value of any one Schedule B code is in excess of $2,500 US, you'll have to file an AES. In most circumstances, if the value is lower than that, then an AES doesn't need to be filed, with the exception that the goods are under an export control. Okay, so I just want to provide some glossary terms. So documentation requirements, like I said, most international transactions can require numerous documents. And it's important that all these documents be filled out correctly. And sometimes there is a specific time frame in which the document can be completed. In fact, what we'll see later on is that in certain cases, you may need to have the involvement of a third party, and you have to trigger something in advance. There's timings at which the declaration before your goods come to a port need to be filled in. So each document can have its own time frame by which it needs to be submitted. There may be more than one original document for several parties in the event that you're involving multiple different countries or multiple different entities in a transaction. So it's not unusual if there's more than one original document. And this is particular when we talk about the topic of bills of lading. There are some countries that could require documents to be printed on paper and not submitted electronically. This is becoming exceedingly rare. There was a time in which it was more common as a form of trying to maintain authenticity of the documentation. In fact, as kind of a barrier to entry, if you will. The vast majority of things are electronic, but it is possible to occasionally encounter a situation where a foreign government may require a piece of paper to be submitted, like literally a piece of paper. Okay, and there is a lot of apparent redundancy and detail in documentation, unfortunately, but that goes back to some of the reasons I'd already mentioned, that there is this, the best practice is to be as explicit as possible, to provide as much information up front so that both parties are very clear in what the transaction entails. So as a marketing tool, one of the major things I'll hit upon, which is a common thing that most U.S. companies don't do in the beginning, is offering something called a pro forma invoice, which I'll detail a little bit later. But in short, the pro forma invoice is a document that's meant to project to the buyer what they're actually going to be purchasing as a way for them to understand what all of the details will be, exactly what are they going to be purchasing. And this is not something that U.S. sellers often do. The commercial invoice, which again I'll detail a lot more specificity, has a lot more information in it than the average invoice that most U.S. companies provide today. There has to be a lot of details. It needs to be precise, and it needs to provide information that the buyer, if they're the importer of record, they'll need to have a lot of the information in order to competently clear customs in their country. So it's goes without saying that the certificates, there could be a number of certificates that are asked by the buyer, and that's something that I'll mention in a little bit what those things could be. All right, and we also just talked about the number of originals and all documents. So this is an image. So a number of years ago, the World Bank, the big non-government organization, did a study that showed how many documents on average are required to get goods into a country or out of a country. And this chart, really what it's saying is that in the recent past, there has been a de-escalation. There has been a simplification of documents required to get goods in. The takeaway here is that in general, you can expect to, if you're selling into a developing country, odds are that there's a higher probability that you're going to be asked to provide a document that maybe you've never heard of before, or that is not common for like a lot of other countries. If you're selling into, quote unquote, industrialized country, a Western country, there's a greater likelihood that they're not going to ask for a great deal of paperwork of documents to be filled out. In fact, the lowest average number of documents is selling into the European Union. On average, they asked for 2 or 3 documents to get in. It's not to say that they don't have their own bureaucracy and regulatory headache in other aspects, but when it comes to what documents are required just to clear customs, it's typically looked at as the gold standard of the fewest number of documents required for entry. I know that if you were to dive into this, on the high end is 14, 15 documents could be required for entry in a country like Tajikistan, not exactly a hotbed of imports from the U.S., but just to make sure that people understand kind of like what the writing scale is. So this is what the typical process of an international sale through the document trail looks like. Starting with, on the left here, a purchase order. So you can understand that you're someone who's a seller, you receive an invitation from someone that wants to buy from you. So the foreign purchaser sends you this document. It's a purchase order. It's what they want to buy. Next, hopefully what you're doing is someone at your company, this could be you or someone that works for you, should send back a pro forma invoice. And then that in turn gets sent to the buyer, and then they sign that, they return it to you, then you send that order to production, you do whatever, you schedule it, you put it in motion that you're going to fulfill it, and then lastly, you're providing a commercial invoice. Like I said before, for a lot of companies, they miss that pro forma invoice step. What they'll do is they'll take in a purchase order, they'll just say like, thank you, we've got it. And then they'll just pass it along they'll schedule it, they'll build it, they'll do whatever, and they'll just go to execute it. But what I want to argue for all of you is that it's very important, this step, the pro forma invoice, between the purchase order and the pro forma invoice. You have to understand that while your foreign buyer has the right to ask whatever they want of you, they could, they might say, we want to buy 10 elephants from you, but you don't have 10 elephants to sell. So this is your opportunity to go back and tell them, I can't deliver that quantity, or I can't deliver in that time frame that you need. So instead, you could say, this is what I'm willing to offer you. So this pro forma invoice is actually, that's what constitutes your agreement. This is the sales agreement that you're offering to them. It's a tender of, I can offer to sell you 10 elephants and ship them next week. And therefore, you're not caught up in a system of trying to catch up to what they're asking for. And at this point, it should detail what the price is, what the value is, what the quantity is, when you deliver it. But in particular, if we're talking about for a larger company, if it's a larger order, this is where it becomes very critical, since the pro forma invoice will it also is asking for all the different details that the buyer may need by the time they go to claim it at customs. I know that for a lot of companies, if they're new to this, they will say every time we get an international order, it's a fire drill. That because they're not following this step, all the information that's put on the pro forma invoice is going to be asked for at some point. It's a matter of trying to build this information up front, of telling the seller this is the totality of all the details surrounding this order, what it looks like in the beginning. And I understand, I've been there. I've instituted this policy at companies. If you don't do this, it's a hassle because you'd kind of rather wait until later to submit that information. Um, but at some point, it's got to come out. And therefore, I encourage you to employ this best practice technique. In some cases, if the order is large enough, it may even be a required document as it pertains to other payment mechanisms that I'm not going to get into in this presentation, but it has a really key role in this whole process. So really, this is your opportunity to negotiate with the seller what you're willing to offer them, under what terms, what conditions. In the event that there's a problem, in the event that there's some mix-up, that the order went to the wrong place or was the wrong amount or whatever, you could always go back and look at this, the signed part of it. Remember the CISG. The fact that they put their signature on it means that they consent to it, that you've gotten it correct, that what you're offering is true. I could tell you stories in the past where, as an exporter myself, I sent the wrong items to a customer of ours in Australia. I sent it to the wrong side of the country. But on later reflection, when we looked at the documentation, they signed off on the performa that I sent them, detailing where the point of delivery was. And even though they told me over email and over phone that it's got to go to some other location, I mixed that up in the course of the busyness of my day. But going back to the documentation, I was able to say, but you, Mr. Customer, put your signature saying that it was okay for us to ship to this location. And therefore, it took the heat off of the dispute where they challenged us, and I was able to say, you committed to this, and you were also part of the issue. We gave you an opportunity to review this detail, and you still accepted it. So it saved us. And for all the different reasons I'm talking about, it's important for you to safeguard yourself and to be clear about what the transaction is supposed to look like. Okay, I think I've beaten that to death a little bit, but it's a very important point, so I just want to stress that. Now, if we back up, what are some other documents that I think I would recommend someone look into? It starts off with a forecast. People who buy hate giving forecasts, but if you could all get this out of your foreign purchaser, ask for a forecast, work with them to develop a forecast, and then the forecast should lead into submitting a purchase order, and then you giving them performa invoice, and then a signed performa. And at the very end, the commercial invoice, this is the statement of what was actually produced, what was offered to them. If you're selling a physical good, then there's a couple of the other key document that you're going to be providing is a packing list, and then there's other documents which I'll get into here in just a moment. I've talked a lot about what the performa invoice is. What is the performa invoice? These are all the details that should be included in a performa invoice. This is not a simple quotation. All right, it should have the name and address of your seller and buyer. It should have the reference number of the purchase order they sent in and what was their date. It should have a list of the requested products and maybe a brief description of what they're trying to buy. The price of each item, including what currency. It's not just sufficient to put a dollar sign. There's other countries that use a dollar sign as their currency. You may include things like what the cubic volume of and the dimensions are. You don't have to, but that would be a nice thing to add. Shipping weight, a trade discount, the delivery point, the Incoterm, the term of sale, the term of payment, if there's insurance, if you know what the shipping costs are. What is the validity period for this quotation? It can't be good indefinitely, right? The total charges to be paid by the customer was the estimated shipping date, and I mentioned the currency. In so many ways, it's supposed to look like the commercial invoice. The performa invoice is supposed to be a snapshot of what the commercial invoice would look like. The commercial invoice has all those same items too, and really the only difference is that this is the final version of like what you've offered. It may have on there like the shipping details, what your booking number is, or something like this. But it's the invoice that the customer is expected to pay off of. All right, so let's introduce the first document that I haven't talked to this point. It's called a bill of lading. What is a bill of lading? A bill of lading is a generic term used to describe a document that fulfills three functions for international transport. Number one, it's a contract between the carrier and the shipper. And the carrier is going to be like your freight forwarder, the transport company. The shipper is typically you if you're the exporter. You don't have to be, but you're the one who's shipping it, and you're shipping it to someone who's carrying it. So it's a contract between you. If you're using DHL or something, DHL is going to offer you a bill of lading because you're the shipper and they're the carrier. The carrier agrees to transport the goods from A to B for a given price. Number two, the bill of lading is also a receipt for the goods. It's signed by the carrier and signifies that the goods were received in good condition. The bill of lading is also a certificate of title. Whatever party had the original bill of lading is considered the owner of the goods. So as a contract of carriage, The bill of lading can take different names depending on the mode of transportation. So, bill of lading could be called an ocean bill of lading if it's going via transport by ocean, an air waybill when the goods are traveling by air, an intermodal bill of lading when the goods travel on more than one mode of transportation under a single contract, and a uniform bill of lading when the goods travel by road or rail. So, those are all different ways of saying, the same thing, a bill of lading. The shipper, the firm that enters in the contract, can be either the exporter or the importer, depending on what Incoterm that's used. As a certificate of title, on the bill of lading, there's a box called consignee, in which the shipper identifies the firm that will take title to the goods from the carrier. And there's two ways of filling this box. Number one, if the box is left blank or the words to order are used, then the bill of lading is said to be negotiable. The owner of the goods in the destination port is the entity with the original bill of lading. The goods can be sold while they're being transported. So this is a scenario where maybe someone has purchased, let's say, a container of wheat or something, and they know that this is a commodity. They'll find the buyer, and it's going to be on the water for 4 weeks, and they use that time to kind of do an auction or something to figure out who the buyer is going to be. So that allows the bill of lading to be issued, but they're saying they don't know who the end buyer is going to be until a later date. So you just put to order in that space. But if the name of the consignee is entered, then that only that firm can pick up the goods from the carrier. That would be called a straight bill of lading. And as you can imagine, only ocean bills of lading are negotiable because of the time involved from the point in which the goods start their voyage to when they end it. So an airway bill is never going to be straight, or I'm sorry, it's never going to be to order. It's always going to be straight. So the owner has to be included on the bill of lading when it's issued under an airway bill. And this is just an image of what a bill of lading looks like when it's an ocean bill. So it can be straight or negotiable. This is an image of what an airway bill can look like. It's always going to be straight, and it's going to come from the freight forwarder, or it could be from an airline. So there's other bills of lading. The uniform bill of lading, we said, when the goods are transported on trucks and trains, could be either domestically or internationally. Intermodal bill of lading for intermodal transportation, domestic, international of goods. A few other things, a packing list. So this is a different document. This is a document that lists out what the shipment contains in great detail. A packing list always accompanies every shipment. This is a very important document. It's different than like a packing slip. It really should spell out, if you're sending physical goods, how many boxes, the dimension of those boxes, what's located in those boxes. Customs can be very interested in this because this is a great way for them to figure out whether or not there's something that shouldn't be included in the shipment, if there's something that's been missing from the shipment. It's just a great check to understand if the goods in that shipment really are what is supposed to be. It could also be a terrific way for you to figure out if something was missing from the shipment, because your invoice can say one thing, but this is like the receipt for what was really put in the truck, on the ship, whatever it is. A manifest. This is something that's it's produced by the vessel operators. So this is internal to the shipping company. They list all the cargo that's on the transportation vehicle. So just like an airplane has a manifest, an ocean vessel will have a manifest. That's not something that exporter or importer usually has visibility to, but to know that this document exists in the event that it's necessary, like in the case of like an insurance claim, let's say. There's a couple of the transport documents. The shipper's letter of instruction, also called the SLI. This is a document where the shipper spells out how they want the carrier to handle the goods while they're in transit. So let's suppose that the goods are, they need to be chilled at a certain temperature, or they are fragile, or they can't move a great deal. This is a way for a document that you'll fill out to communicate to your freight forwarder just if there's a special care that needs to apply to that shipment. This could also include things like dangerous goods. There's a whole set of different documents that I'm not going to get into here, but in the event that you are shipping something that is hazardous, it's explosive, it's flammable, whatever, this would be something you'd spell out in the SLI that there are dangerous goods, and then your freight forwarder would come back and have you fill out additional documents that detail just what is the nature of that, what is the cause for the hazard, so that it can it indicates just what modes of transportation it can take. Oftentimes that means it can't be transferred via air. It might only be able to go via ocean, etc. All right. To this point, what we've really focused on are the types of documents that are the focal point for export. But in my line of work, very often there's a huge subset of work and investigation we have to do that are actually focused on the documents required for import. So the catch here is that in some cases you might find yourself at various points being an importer as well as an exporter. So you might find yourself having to issue these, working with your exporter to have some of these issued. My experience is that no matter what side you're on, number one, to be available to understand that these documents exist is useful for you to understand, especially if you're requested to produce one of these or assist in someone obtaining one of these. But they all have their own purpose, and I think it's worthwhile to understand what these various import documents do. It very well could be that you wouldn't, if you're the exporter, you wouldn't be responsible for producing these, but it might be useful for you to understand that they exist because you may want the importer to produce one of these. So let's look at these one at a time. So the first thing is something called a certificate of origin. So the certificate of origin is a document provided by the exporter's Chamber of Commerce that attests the goods originate from the country in which the exporter is located. This is something that's often tied to restrictions that a country might have on goods coming from a certain place. In our current environment right now, where there's all kinds of tariffs being assessed, and the tariffs are very specific to a country. So goods coming from China are, they're subject to a very high tariff at the current moment. So you may, as an importer, let's say, you might ask for a certificate of origin to be issued, stating that the goods you're purchasing are not coming from China. They were manufactured in, let's say, Vietnam or something like this. So this would be a way for you to present to U.S. Customs that the tariff rate that should apply to these apply from Vietnam and not from China. But that's just one example of what the purpose is of a certificate of origin. A certificate of manufacture, it's similar to a certificate of origin, but it usually is looking to a greater detail of where something came from. So it's a document provided by the Exporters Chamber of Commerce that attests that the goods are manufactured in the country in which the exporter is located. So this can be provided by an Exporters Chamber of Commerce. It could also be supplied by someone that has direct knowledge of the creation process of where the goods came from. What's on here is the North American Free Trade Agreement Certificate of Origin. That's the most, I guess, notorious, if you want to call it, well known. Although NAFTA has been retired, it's been replaced by USMCA. The same logic exists that under free trade agreements, there could be a really specific measurement of like, do the goods come from this country? We have an agreement with such and such other country, and it needs to pass a very high standard to qualify for preferential treatments. And so in this case, the certificate of origin is really a certificate of manufacture. It really asks that someone that has intimate knowledge of the creation process of the goods can testify, that the goods came from a certain country, and then maybe also answer some further qualifying questions that they were made to a certain standard, and then could back that up if necessary, because they're trying to meet like a privilege threshold of a lower tariff treatment. A certificate of inspection. So this is a document provided by an independent inspection company that attests that the goods conform to the description contained in the invoice provided by the exporter. So let's suppose that you're trying to buy, I don't know, a container of mangoes, and you're buying it from a seller that's in Thailand, and you've never bought from them before, and you have some concern like, oh gosh, I'm about to buy $50,000 worth of mangoes, and they're saying that they're all in such and such a condition. I'm not going to fly over there and attest that they're all in a certain condition. What you might do is you might request a certificate of inspection to be included as a caveat, to this sale. And what you'll do is that you'll hire a third-party laboratory, usually, that will come in and visit the site and say, yes, the quantity of mangoes that you're expecting, they all had to be within a certain ripeness or a certain condition. And so this third party, this disinterested person will write up a report detailing that the goods that you thought you were buying, this other person saw them, tested them, and did verify that what you're buying is what you're getting. And therefore, you're not just relying on the honor system, just the word of what your buyer is. You might choose to employ this, let's say, if you have been working with the same supplier or making, shipments to the same company, but you've noticed a decline in the quality. So this is a way of kind of having a check of, all right, you said that you've improved your process. I'm hiring somebody else to verify that you really are following this different policy. And so that's why your certificate of inspection can come in handy. Phytosanitary and veterinary certificates. So they attested the goods conform to an agricultural standard of the importing country. In a similar way, a veterinary certificate attests that animals and animal products are free from contaminants and disease before they're exported. Very often, these are called health certificates. So it's probably understood that, especially if something is coming in, it's biological in nature, it's organic in nature. There's a fear that maybe the goods are contaminated. They're carrying some type of an illness. Think E. coli or something like that. And very often, what the requirement is going to be that before you are allowed to enter those goods into the custom territory of the United States, let's say, you have to get a third-party laboratory, a facility that says these goods are free from pathogens, they're free from contaminants, whatever it is. Years ago, I used to work in the pet food industry, and we would have to get the Department of Health to sign off, give us health certificates for our pet food. We'd have to send a sample to their laboratory, and it took them about 24 to 48 hours to turn around the results of this. And it would come back. This is the level of salmonella that was detected. This is the level of what other, pathogen they were looking for. And as long as it was under the threshold for the other country we're exporting it to, this was deemed acceptable, and then we were allowed to ship the goods off. And then we'd have to present that health certificate at the customs clearance in Germany, let's say, in order for them to be cleared. If we didn't get this health certificate, the goods were not entering into that other territory, and we had to start all over again. And it was a bit of a stressful thing to go through. Okay, certificate of analysis. This attests that the goods conform to a chemical description and purity levels contained in the invoice provided by the exporter. So think about the certificate of conformity that we saw before. This is in the event that you have something that needs a chemical analysis. So you're going to take a sample and you're going to send it to a laboratory, and they're going to say, this is the dilution level that you wanted. This is, anything that you can't verify with the naked eye. It needs to go, under a microscope. It needs to go into, I don't know, whatever they're going to use, a spectrometer or something like that. A scientific analysis that says the goods that you think that you're getting or the goods that you're going to sell, they do meet some chemical standard typically that the buyer or seller is looking for. That's a certificate of analysis. Certificate of insurance. This is rather straightforward. A document that says the exporter's insurance company attests the goods are insured. There are some cases in countries where goods won't be permitted entry unless they have insurance. And so you may be required to provide the certificate of insurance, just saying, yes, we bought an insurance policy on these. As an additional measure of guarantee in the event that the goods are somehow lost or they're not in the condition they expected, etc. So a certificate of insurance is a document associated with export import. A couple of import documents of note: a consular invoice. This is a commercial invoice printed on stationery. It doesn't have to be printed on stationery, but there are still some that require that. Provided by the consulate of the country in which the goods will be imported. I'd also put an apostille in that same category too. An apostille is something that has to be obtained by a consulary office that gives permission. That is stating that you've got the permission to sell the goods into the other country that you're exporting to. Import license. This is an expressed authorization granted by the government of the importing country to bring the particular good into that country. An import license isn't something that usually an exporter can't even apply for unless you somehow are the importer of record, and maybe if you have an office there. But usually, for the smaller companies that I'm working with, an import license is the responsibility of the importer alone. A certificate of free sale. This is a document that attests that the product conforms to all the regulations in the place in the exporting country and that it could be sold freely in the exporting country. So some porters use the certificate as a guarantee of quality. So really what the certificate of free sale, the intention of this is to say, the other country is saying, can you provide us a certificate of free sale? Meaning that those same cookies and foods could be sold in your market here in the US. There's nothing that would prohibit it. And you're not trying to offload goods that couldn't be sold here, that have been spoiled, that have been second rate, that are, not functioning. And so that's a document that companies may be asked to obtain from their Chamber of Commerce that would attest that the goods are available for sale. The same goods are available for sale in the US market. And that comes up surprisingly. I don't want to say it's a frequent thing, but more often than you'd expect. Some importers could be asking for that. Just a brief note on customs brokers. So I'm not going to read through this whole thing. Maybe you've covered this in a different section. I don't know. But a customs broker is this person that has the authority to enter information that is a customs broker, a majority of customs brokers' job is working on imports, in fact. Typically, they're very knowledgeable about import requirements. They're busy right now calculating all the tariffs of US. They're the ones that are filing customs paperwork. They're advising their companies, the importers usually, on laws, regulations, and maybe even making determinations of what harmonized tariff code is the appropriate one to use for the goods coming in. Customs brokers should be also knowledgeable about export procedures, but very often they might ask if you can to talk to a customs broker in the country where the goods are being imported. But they play a very important role, and if you're going to be involved seriously in import export, it's a very good idea to become familiar with customs brokers in your area. Customs brokers may or may not work for a freight forwarder. It's not unusual for freight forwarders to have customs brokers on their team, but there are also customs brokerages that are independent of freight forwarding companies. This is a brief note about power of attorney. There's this concept of something called a USPPI, a U.S. principal party in interest. They're the ones who are ultimately responsible for an export transaction. So the concept behind this, and this is something in the U.S., if you are not someone who is the exporter of record, you've received an order that came from, I don't know, New Jersey or something like that, and you're selling goods. And you sell to this company in New Jersey, but then they turn around, they have a tie to someone in Iran. I don't know. This is, hypothetically. So you sell to someone in New Jersey, and this company in New Jersey sells to someone in Iran. Well, you could say that, you weren't the exporter of record, you didn't know anything about it, but technically you would be considered the U.S. principal party in interest. You were the one that gained the financial benefit of that transaction, and in some way you have some tie to how those goods end up in Iran. And if you haven't covered this before, we're really not supposed to be selling goods to Iran. There's an embargo against selling goods to Iran with minimal exception. So that's maybe the more direct case is if you are selling something and you're not the exporter of record, you're selling a routed shipment. You're selling something on an Incoterm where it's Ex Works, the importer is taking care of everything, and yeah, maybe they ask you to ship the goods to New Jersey, but then they reroute it to someplace else. This is a term to understand that you as the financial beneficiary, you're considered the U.S. principal party in interest, and you have a vested stake in understanding where your goods go. And the U.S. government just doesn't accept that you're turning a blind eye to your goods just disappearing anywhere. And this is in particular if you're selling goods that could be used for nefarious things. And I don't want to have to get into all that, but this is just a term to help you understand that the person that benefits from an export transaction financially has a vested interest to make sure those goods end up in the right place. Okay. As such, a U.S. or foreign principal party interest has to give power of attorney or written permission to an agent to prepare an EEI submission. And so what this means is occasionally one of my clients will say, I was, I'm preparing to do, customs filing, or I'm sending a good out of the country, and I engaged the services of a freight forwarder, and they sent me this document that said I need to give them power of attorney. Can they do that? Yes, that's exactly how it works. That if you're not the person that's going to be entering in the customs clearance information in the EEI, someone's got to do it. And you have to give power of attorney to the company that's going to represent you, the customs broker that's going to do the customs filing for you, because there are stakes involved. They have to get it right, and they have to test that the transaction is going to happen as you say it is, and there is some responsibility that's tied to it. So that's not unusual. All right. Um, I don't know if Maurice or Sandra had mentioned to other people, to any of you, but there is a trade training library. A couple of things that I've contributed to this, the Trade Passport Library that was sponsored by NASBITE International. These are a couple of videos that I'd recommend if you get a copy of this presentation later on. If you want to investigate for your own professional development, for your own learning, to watch a couple of these videos that explain a few of the topics that I've touched on, but maybe you want to know for a greater detail. These are a proper filing of an EEI, which Bob Imbriani, who I know is also a presenter previously in this program, how to do an export quote, what the performa invoice looks like, and then harmonized tariff codes. Again, our friend Bob Imbriani provided that one. I think I'm a little bit earlier than the time you gave me. Maurice was kind of challenging me if I would be able to fit it all in at the time that was given. So hopefully, but that didn't mean that I was like speaking too quickly. I don't know if you have time for questions, or I'm looking at the chat here. I don't really see too many questions, but I'd be happy to answer any.
Yes, are there any questions from the audience?
Yes,
Go
yes, this
ahead.
is Queen Nina Maurice. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Nate, for this insightful information. It really helped a lot. And I do have a question. Um, when you're doing, okay, so I'm interested in import and export
All
and
right.
primarily between the US and Africa. I'm working
Okay.
with African farmers as we speak. I have noticed I saw a label recently where it was a food product and it said that the products came from US, from Brazil, and I forget this third country. So how do what paperwork, how do you pull that together? Would it be different certificates from each country? So, say if I wanted to create a product that was, locally sourced in the US, but also the product contained from Africa, how would that work with this paperwork?
All right. So let me see if I understand what your question is. So you are saying that you may be sourcing ingredients from various African countries, but they
Yeah.
themselves, but those sources might also have inputs from other places?
No, the product would be a U.S. product, but it would be sourced from some of the product would be ingredients, I'm sorry, would be sourced from different African countries. So do I need a certificate on each one of those countries to,
Well, the way I understand your question here is there's two different things happening. So, the one is if you're the one that's going to be responsible for sourcing those ingredients, then yes, there is a procedure for how to get those ingredients into the U.S. from whatever country they're coming from. But the second question, I guess my understanding is if you're then going to turn that into something else in the United States, you're going to those are the ingredients. Let's suppose you're getting like wheat and I don't know berries or something from other places, and then you're going to turn that into a cake or something here that then it becomes something else. So and at that point we're not talking about like certificates or anything because this is something you've created in the US unless I suppose if you're going to turn around and resell those to other countries.
well, here's a good scenario. Here's an example. I just met a gentleman here in Los Angeles who makes a spice mix,
Okay.
and he sourced the spices from from African countries as well as somewhere I think Brazil or Caribbean or whatever. So his spice mix is a mix of all these different spices
hmm
from all over the world.
hmm And are those coming from one common source or are those coming from individual places?
From different yeah, it's like his spice mix has several spices from like three different West African countries specifically, and but he's manufacturing it here in Los Angeles.
Okay. So I can only say that, my expertise is going to stop from after the point that goods are going to come into the U.S. Fortunately for us, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection has very clear guidelines on how to import goods. It's one of the advantages that we have in the U.S. And in fact, they've published how-to guides on how to import goods. And if you're talking about food goods, there is a registry list that the FDA has for foreign food producers. And the first step would be that the foreign food producer has got to have their name listed on that list of qualified locations, facilities to meet the U.S. FDA standards. So that would, I mean, I'm not an import expert per se. Some of my other colleagues in this panel might be able to talk to this a little bit better, but I've had to answer the question a number of times, and I know that those two things would be the first areas that I'd look at when bringing ingredients in from other countries, food ingredients. But after that point, suppose you've brought in your spices from the West Indies, Guyana, from I don't know wherever it's gonna Sierra Leone, something like that. You're producing that even if it's a spice mix. Then if it's gonna stay in the United States, then my assumption would be it just becomes more of a food labeling issue that you're transparent about like what U.S. consumers would need to understand of, what this is. But I mean that I can't see there being any other like certification issue tied to that.
Okay.
Well, if she wanted to export a product composed of those imported ingredients,
Yeah,
what would the documentation be on the export of the finished product?
yeah, that's a different question. So I wasn't sure if that's quite where this is going. So Maurice brings up a good question. So if they were exported, now we're getting into a slightly different question about, what is the correct country of origin determination. And so
Mhm.
that's going to depend on a few things of like, did you create this into something wholly new? Was there any U.S. input into it? Which country is it going to go to? That's a stickier question than I think maybe we've got time to go into. But it does ask the question of like, well, what did you create with those different inputs? There's the consideration of did you make something entirely new? Did you this idea of substantial transformation? Did you take the wheat and flour and eggs and bake a cake? All right, now a cake is different than any one of those other components that went into it. So yes, it became something totally different. And that's a lengthier conversation and it involves HS codes and then answering the question of where is it going to if you're going to export it. But if you're not exporting it, then the point's kind of moot.
Hmm. Okay.
All right, is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, it's been helpful, of course, not thorough, but like you said, for sake of time. But that is kind of giving me a direction,
All right,
have more insight. Thank you.
okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question, please.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, my name is Gregory Woods. I'm in Northern California. I had an actual export of 2 container loads of in-shell walnuts.
Hmm.
And in the documentation process, the California Food and Ag, they do their certification of the product. So in a 40-foot container of in-shell walnuts, there are 800 bags, 50 pounds each. So the CFA confirmed that everything was fine. Now, I don't know how many bags they actually opened and looked at, but they said it was fine. So the container was sealed, and then I exported the product. Money was exchanged hands and everything. When the buyer received the product and opened the container, they estimated that 40% of the packaging was mildewed. And what I found out later was a month before that season, there was a rain in California. So many of the suppliers had product that had been wasted. As I was a rookie, I kind of got hooked. So, and I didn't know about this. So, even though the California Food and Ag had certified everything was right, the supplier said, "Oh no, we didn't do anything. Everything was fine." What could I have done at that point? Because I didn't have enough insurance to cover all of that, and because the CFA had confirmed in the few bags they opened that everything was proper. What can I do going forward in case something like that should happen?
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Greg. What a story. I have a client that also sent shelled walnuts to China, and this is kind of where I thought you were going. The Chinese refused the shipment because the humidity level surpassed what their standard was, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that it begs the question of a couple of things. That if the understanding a couple of aspects in advance. And this is why so much of what goes in international trade is trying to do your homework up front as much as possible to get as much information out of, let's say, if you're the seller from the buyer standpoint, like what would the buyer need? What is their experience in bringing in those goods to that country? What are sorry, let me answer this in two different ways. The first is not the question you're asking, but what are going to be the expectations from the buyer standpoint, whatever country they're in? What will be the documents? What will be the condition that's necessary? What will be some hurdles? Did they have experience
Mm-hmm.
bringing in that good in order to anticipate what those questions might be? And in the case that I was just mentioning, the walnuts went to Hong Kong, and the buyer was a first-time buyer of walnuts, and they were not prepared for this humidity level check because there had to
Mm-hmm.
be a certain level of, and I think it's probably for the similar reasons. So it's in that case, it's a matter of understanding, what could possibly be the item that throws the wrench into the system by the time the goods arrive, and can they help anticipate in advance, what other certifications might be required? In your case, Greg, I know that this is something the other people on today's panel are going to talk about, but packaging. The exporter is always responsible for the packaging of the goods. Anticipating the condition the goods will arrive in at the end is your responsibility as the exporter. So in my
Mm-hmm.
past, it's not the same thing, but as an exporter, I work for an appliance company, and we pioneered a novel type of adhesive that was supposed to go on. We made blenders, very expensive blenders, and the very first time we rolled this out, we shipped it to Taiwan. And we weren't prepared for the altitude change. And we'd sold these across the United States without any problem. But because we air freighted these to Taiwan, they experienced a great change in temperature on the tarmac, and they made a couple of stops. And by the time our appliances landed in Taiwan, all of the material that was adherent to the outside of the blenders peeled off. And
Wow.
these were blenders that were supposed to sell for $1,200 a piece. And they
Wow.
were mad at us that we didn't test this out. But ultimately, the responsibility fell back on us because the exporter is responsible for ensuring the goods can arrive in the integrity intended until the end point. And so, in your case, that is a matter of anticipating what will be the temperature change, what could be the humidity change,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of damage could they sustain, and things like that. And I'm sure that perhaps for more experienced walnut exporters, they probably are hyper aware of like the humidity to have submit an SLI, let's say, that says that the walnuts need to be transported in, let's say, a reefer container, a refrigerated container, or that there's, a humidifier going inside the container. I mean, I don't know what measures they would take, but that that is that is something that painfully people find out by doing, I think, the
Mm-hmm.
first time and finding out, the expensive way of what could possibly happen to, you know, make my export goods fall out of quality spec. But
Mm-hmm.
it sounds to me like you did a lot right, but you just weren't anticipating that one very critical thing that could kind of ruin in the agricultural side. We see this quite a bit. I deal with like soy farmers and corn producers, and they're very aware that if they're not treated the right way in advance, they're not going to survive. Some of them might spoil, but there is like some tolerance of like
Mm-hmm.
how much spoilage is acceptable. So that's a common issue, I'd say.
Would it be rather than have someone like SGS open 800 bags and check them, which is too expensive, would a more advisable point be to have a blanket insurance policy that I should have had? Because and this was completely new to me. I didn't know. So what should I do in order to document that such anything go wrong, such as what I'm just speaking of, that I'm able to recoup the investment and pay back the buyer?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair question too. There's a food exporter that I know here. They do 100% quality inspection. And as a matter of fact, they take pictures of the food after they've been packaged. And I mean, they've gone to that extent of saying like before they've wrapped up this carton, they take a photo of it. It gets documented what number it is, and it's matching like what the crate number is, so that they could tell like what the quality control is. Um, so it looks like, yeah, someone else here, Sani, is saying they take 100% insurance of the commodity value. There's different ways of trying to contain your risk. Insurance is definitely a way of going about doing it. Um, the quality control, I'd only say that for how long the goods will be in transit, the way the goods look today is not exactly going to be a pure picture of what they'll look like in the future.
You're right.
So I don't know if that's always the answer, just doing a 100% quality check. It's
Okay.
understanding what would be the cause for making the goods spoil faster, and have you taken a measure to absorb the moisture in the container? I don't know, whatever it might be.
Okay. I
All right.
appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate your
We're going to
question.
hear about cargo insurance next. So Greg, you might want to save that question. But I'm not sure the cargo insurance covers problems prior to the shipment that you said occurred in your case. It might have protected against humidity problems or other problems in transit, but we can raise that later. We still
Yeah.
have a couple more minutes. Any other questions?
Looks like Sunny has his hand up.
Yes,
Sorry.
sir. I do have a question.
Go ahead.
And Nate, my question is specifically about the PPI, primary party of interest topic you brought up earlier.
Sure.
So in our case, what we do to address that problem is because So we are in the oil and gas business, and in the oil and gas business, we have challenges with many countries that produce oil and gas. So we want to make sure we are not buying from them. We are not doing any trade with them. We also know that in the industry, many companies, say from Russia or from Iran, they have set up their front companies in other countries, right? There's only so much 007 work we can do, right? So what we do is we ask them to include in our contracts and whatnot every party that's involved in the transaction. Where they're going to send. We always talk to the end buyer, end supplier, people who are going to sign the documents at the end of the day, people who are people of interest at the end of the day, to protect ourselves. We keep paper trail. We ask our trading partners to explicitly include in the contracts that these are the only parties who are involved, right? So everyone is known, kind of using the Anti-Terrorism Act from the banking sector. That's where I got the idea.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, anyone can say these 5 companies are the only ones involved, but then there's a 6th company that's located in Moscow, which I wouldn't know. Would that kind of paper trail and contracts protect us or not?
I'm no lawyer, but I have an opinion on this, and I've been to enough
Yes, please.
trainings. So I don't know if you've already done a section on export compliance, but this sounds like an export compliance question. In fact, I had a meeting with a client earlier today. We were just talking about this. If something were to happen, and here I'm kind of parroting the words from the Bureau of Industry and Security. I've been in enough of their trainings where this topic has come up again and again. So there's a series of aggravating circumstances and mitigating circumstances in the event that some type of a violation is discovered. So if you have the records, and this is good, building an export compliance program is a really sound thing to do for any company that is selling goods, and there's the potential that someone is going to take notice of it, that there are, let's say, bad actors, people on our sanctions list that are trying to buy these U.S. source goods. Then having an export compliance plan in place is an excellent way of addressing that. And really, it's a safeguard. It's a policy and procedure that says we're going to ask these questions every time. We're going to document that we've communicated what the policy is. We've communicated what our legal obligations are. We've educated people who are buying our products that the goods aren't supposed to fall into the wrong hands, et cetera, et cetera. And so, in the event that there is unfortunately an investigation or an oops, these goods ended up in the wrong hands, and suddenly the U.S. government has triggered an investigation, that you could go back and say, we did this. We have an export compliance plan in place. We asked these questions. We asked them to sign these documents. We asked them to sign a BIS form 711 disclosing the ultimate person purchase that we've done. We've checked the consolidated screening list that all the parties involved didn't appear on any of the government bad guys lists and so forth. And so those will all be things that the U.S. government, I think, don't quote me on this, again, I'm not a lawyer, but look favorably on, that you are trying to hold the good faith of doing practices that the U.S. government wants you to follow, instead of having blinders on, just doing things recklessly, not asking questions, not being interested in where the goods are going, not conveying that the goods, should be controlled. One thing I didn't mention on this training, which I probably could have if there was more time, there's something called a destination control statement saying, it's the type of wording that should be included in any commercial invoice saying that, since you're selling from the U.S., that all the goods flowing from the U.S. should follow U.S. export laws and regulations. So anyway, a longer answer maybe than one, Sunny, but that's what I'd say. The reality is that motivated bad actors will always try to skirt the law, will try to use a shell company, get around, take advantage of companies that maybe aren't asking those questions. And the best thing you could do is to try to follow the guidelines, and then know that if you do get tricked somehow, that you could always say, hey, listen, I was trying to follow the rules. I was trying to do everything right. And therefore, I think you should expect a lighter penalty or as a result.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I have a question, but if there's anyone else in the group that has a question first, anyone? Okay, my question is on the original EEI filing in the US, when you have a shipment and you have to file that document, EEI filing, it asks for a Schedule B number, I assume, some kind of code number. We are asking our clients to identify their product for our purposes by their Schedule B number. How would you suggest, if they don't know it offhand, they are able to determine what that Schedule B number is to put on their EEI filing and to let us know about it?
I think that's a great question. I think that there are a lot of resources that can help guide a company to make that decision. I know that there is a Schedule B search engine that's provided by the U.S. Department of Census. Um, Sorry, the U.S. Census has a Schedule B search engine. I mean, the default way, I mean, the gold standard is to work with a customs broker, someone that's really versed in this. While they are probably going to be better versed in, HTS US code, Schedule B is the close cousin, and I think that they could help make a determination, especially if it's something tricky. I mean, we could go into, if you really wanted to get crazy, you could look into the cross database, the customs ruling online database, to look if there was any customs rulings on your Schedule B. But I mean, if it were the practical advice, I'd say, starting with the Schedule B search engine to do a qualifying first glance of this is the basic description of the commodity in question. You'll answer a couple of qualifying questions to kind of narrow down what that is. Having a trade advisor nearby that understands this process is, I think, an excellent double, a verification. I know that we get these questions from our clients on a case by case basis. They'll say, "Hey, this is the Schedule B number I looked up," and we have we're better versed than looking into some of the nitty gritty, and we can provide evidence. And we have done that. There have been occasions where maybe you don't feel comfortable looking through the customs ruling online database, but we do, and we could always say, yes, we feel comfortable that the selection you made is correct, and there's also maybe some rulings that seem to back up that this has been talked about before, and a judge has ruled that if it does such and such, then yes, it is this. I mean, that's if you really want to get crazy about it, but that's how I would answer that.
Okay, well, the reason we want that Schedule B number is not just because you have to use it to file your document, but with that Schedule B number, we can pull up the relevant export statistics by that product. So if
sure.
if it goes to 10 digits on Schedule B, it might differentiate red lipstick from purple lipstick. And the more we can be specific, the more we can generate statistics that show you which countries are the leading and fastest growing destinations for that product. So it is sometimes difficult even to use the search engine. Now, next week, in that open-ended session, I'm going to go over some web resources that you have access to, and one of those will get into that Schedule B search engine, and you'll be able to see, how you can try to navigate through it. So it's time. If there are no other questions, we have a break and we'll resume with cargo insurance. Any final thoughts or questions? Okay.
Welcome back, everyone. Maurice, do you want to take over?
Yes, I see some questions in the chat, but Nate isn't with us any longer, so we'll take note of those and try to cover them. If not, probably not today, but in the next week when we open it up to all kinds of your questions that we hear of in advance and during. So now we're going to proceed with the regular program. We switched it around a little bit. Normally, cargo insurance would come after what a freight forwarder does, but Gabe Schwery, who does the freight forwarding, is teaching a class right now, and he couldn't do it until after the cargo insurance discussion. So we switched that around, and we're going to start off with how to protect export goods against loss in transit. That's what cargo insurance is. And our speaker is Alex Campion. He has 5 years of experience in export insurance, first with Roanoke and now with Epic. Those are two of the biggies in the cargo insurance field. And so he turned it over to Alex to get us going here on what cargo insurance is about.
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, and you can
Okay.
elaborate on your background as you wish.
Yeah, sure. And I'm also sharing my screen. Can you guys see
Okay,
this okay?
yes.
Okay, cool. I will go through and move forward with the presentation. And I will start with a little bit of my professional background. Um, like unfortunately many salespeople, I'm all too comfortable talking about myself. I apologize for that. But just a quick background just so you understand kind of who I am and what I do and kind of where I came from. Just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an idea. So I do hold a bachelor's degree in business. My name is Alex Campion with Epic Insurance Brokers. I'm an assistant vice president at Epic, and I really what I primarily do is work with clients. I'm really a salesperson more than anything. And I manage the relationship between folks that need insurance, be it logistics providers or shippers, and the insurance markets available to them. So again, I first, I guess, kind of got into this while I was a student. I studied business at Temple University in the Philadelphia area where I grew up. Um, at that point, I had to pick a major, and I think it was probably my mom being a flight attendant and us doing some traveling internationally that made me think that international business was something that I'd be interested in, and I just was like a global thinker and was curious about the world, and thought I would use my education as a way to further it. I also studied Spanish, which led me into international business, and really how I got particularly into the space I'm in now was a study abroad trip at Lloyd's of London in 2015, 10 years ago, which is crazy to think about because it doesn't feel that long ago, like so many things. But Lloyd's of London is essentially the World Trade Center for insurance, and I'm actually going to get into Lloyd's on this conversation. But it was on that kind of study abroad trip, which I mostly did, I think, because I was just curious to go to London, and we also went to Germany, and I wanted to do a school trip like that. And I actually found that I really was interested in the cargo insurance market of all things, quite surprisingly for a 21-year-old, but. I like statistics, always loved baseball, and I think it just kind of connected in my brain. At which point I talked to my professor and I said, "Hey, I'm interested in this." And he was like, "Well, you should be. It's a great career path. And frankly, not many people your age want to do it. So there's a lot of opportunity," which led me to a couple different things and eventually on that track. So I've been a licensed property and casualty insurance broker for 5 years. I first got into the space working for Roanoke Insurance Group, which is one of the oldest names, 90-year company, always been a cargo insurance and logistics insurance specialist. Worked there for 4 years and was recruited here to Epic by my current boss, Jim Farrell. We were somewhat competitors, and I joke it was the ultimate if you can't beat them, join them moment sort of for me. So I came over and joined Epic, and yeah, really loving it here, as are most of my clients who've come with me. So it's been a good decision. One thing that I've done very well, I would say, or was encouraged by mentors to do, and it's been really helpful for me, is I've been very active in national and local transportation associations. I'm particularly active in the LA Air Cargo Association. I also attend events for the LA Customs Brokers and Freight Forwarders Association, and then I go to national conferences with the Air Forwarders Association and TIA, the Transportation Intermediary Association, which is really the freight broker domestic logistics conference every year. And just a little about me personally, I live in North Orange County. I'm in Huntington Beach, and I love to surf. Love playing golf, and growing up in the Philadelphia area, I'm a Phillies fan and Eagles fan, and then also, as I mentioned, enjoy traveling. A little bit about Epic, shameless plug since we got you guys all on here. So we are a single source provider of insurance bonds and support services for non-asset based logistics firms, which just means, freight forwarders, warehousing, essentially transportation, not trucking. We've got 200 years of combined logistics experience between all of our different principals. We've got great exclusive programs, which means special pricing and some helpful advantages to our policies over other ones. And then, like I mentioned before, we're active in a lot of associations, which I think is actually a really important thing and kind of keeps our ear to the ground. And I often joke, I think I'm really more part of the logistics industry than I am the insurance industry at the end of the day. So, who's our client base? It's going to be customs brokers, ocean freight forwarders, NVOCCs, or non-vessel operating common carriers. We also work with indirect air carriers and warehouse operators, freight brokers, and domestic freight forwarders, as well as the actual shipper, importer, exporters. And just to give you an idea, this actually is an outdated number. We're actually at $1 billion in revenue. This is a bit misleading. So Epic's a very large company. The division I work for, which focuses on transportation and logistics, is actually a relatively small group, about 30 employees, that does about maybe 12 to $15 million in revenue. So I like to say that, it's like Epic's the army and we're kind of like the Green Berets, how I like to think of it. We're like a specialty group within that I think is quite capable. But Epic as a whole is a great company. I'm very much enjoying working here and just wanted to quickly kind of introduce Epic and some of our capabilities. Moving into kind of the meat and potatoes of the presentation. So what I think that folks in my role, and I'm as guilty as anybody else about this, is we talk a lot about insurance, but really the greater topic here is risk management and insurance. And I'm sure that I and most folks are guilty of this is because we don't necessarily make direct money off of giving you risk management advice, right? But we do by selling you insurance products. So like so many folks, we're gonna, compensation drives behavior, and we're gonna hone in on those things that are more direct revenue generators, right? So, but I really wanted to start the presentation by talking about risk management and introduce this topic to you because risk management is really in many ways actually more beneficial than insurance solutions, as it's not always going to be as costly. And it can actually have a higher leverage effect on your overall business. So, and I just wanted to I did this slide to sort of show the differences between the two topics. So, risk management is, involves enterprise level decision making that impacts each level of an organization. That could be sales, that could be finance, it could be accounting, operations, certainly, logistics, absolutely. Um, you know, and it involves analyzing various risks to a business. And you can decide to avoid, reduce, transfer, or accept these risks. I'm going to get into sort of this 5 points of risk management on another slide. But here's some examples of different risk management. So you could be hiring a new staff, avoiding a certain business opportunity, or getting into more contractual legal situations. So more specifically, if a trucking company or say a logistics company hires a safety or risk manager, that would be a situation where they're bringing in staff to sort of bolster their risk management best practices and avoiding things that could harm the organization. In the freight forwarding logistics world, maybe you make the decision that you're not going to move perishable cargoes. I've seen many logistics companies do that, where they're just like, you know what, perishable foods, it often goes bad, and we get a lot of claims against our policies, and we're just going to avoid perishable cargoes. That would be a example of avoiding a risk to a business. And then contractual law is something that I spend a ton of time on, as do most folks in my space, helping our logistics customers navigate different contracts that shippers want them to that want them to sign, which have an impact on their business. So, maybe some contracts will require the freight forwarder or logistics company to take on full value liability for the cargo. And maybe that's something that they do or do not want to do. And we'll help guide them on that and say, hey, is this worth, is the juice worth the squeeze, as they say. On the other side of that is you as the shipper, which I believe is more the audience here. You could be on the other side of that where you actually reduce your risk by getting a supplier to sign a contract that's in favor of you. So maybe you have a lot of freight to move, and because of that, you're going to leverage your commercial prowess or abilities and volume, and you're going to say, hey, I'll give you freight forwarder X all of my business if you're open to signing a contract where you take on some liability for the cargo that you would not have in a normal statutory cargo situation. And I will also get into the liability of each type of logistics provider. Um, that's risk management on a high level. I've got more information on it. And then insurance. So insurance is really a risk management decision to transfer the risk. So if you don't buy cargo insurance and your $100,000 worth of whatever falls off a ship, that risk is on you, right? And until you purchase that cargo insurance, you have not transferred that risk. Once you buy an insurance product via cargo insurance, you've now transferred the risk to the insurance company. So when something happens, the insurance company is going to pay for that instead of you. And I think the idea of transferring risk is a misunderstood but very important concept when talking about cargo insurance. Another thing that insurance does is it trades a known for an unknown. So, example, keeping things exclusively to cargo insurance for relatability. I would say that, you know, if you're not purchasing insurance, the answer, of, well, what are you going to do if a general average situation is declared on a ship? Or if a fire happens in your warehouse and all your goods are destroyed, what would you do? Oftentimes you don't know. If you have an insurance product, you now do know, and you know exactly what you're going to do. You're going to file a claim with the insurance company, and you're going to have them kind of carry the burden, not just for the financial aspects of it, of course, but also for the procedural aspects. How do you, who's going to clean the warehouse out? Who's going to salvage the goods? Who's going to sell those salvage goods? So all of that now becomes transferred on to another party, which is the advantage of purchasing insurance. And to um, what I call finance the risk, which is basically to say, in the event that a loss happens, maybe, you're shipping dozens of containers a year. There's a good chance that a loss might only happen one out of every 10 or 20 or 30 years even, right? So you're going to basically finance by paying a small amount of premium each year so that in the event of that large loss happening, you've got that coverage. So you're exchanging what are called your insurance premiums to finance this risk. Uh, does anybody have any questions on this so far? Can you guys hear me okay at least?
Yeah, you mentioned general average in passing. I
Yeah, I've
assume
got
what
I've
that
I've got a
means.
slide on that. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I thought that'd be worth talking about. So moving into risk management basic principles, and I encourage everybody, with their business to think about risk through this five basic framework. So in this situation, the risk is we're moving cargo from our U.S. location to foreign destinations, and at any point in that transit, the goods could be stolen, the goods could be lost, the goods could light on fire, many things could happen, right? So in this situation, we can look at it as a way, can we avoid this risk? Can we retain this risk? Can we share this risk? Can we transfer this risk? Or can we reduce the risk? And it's not going to be a one, we did this, we did that, or all of one, all of the other. It's always going to be a combination and sort of a Venn diagram, of different answers, right? Where we're looking to maybe retain some, share some, transfer aspects, reduce other aspects, and in certain situations, we can avoid a risk entirely. So some of the best practices for risk management for exporters. Um, I think number one goes obviously without saying, but is really important is making sure that your goods are packaged to withstand the rigors of transit. That's actually always going to be a warranty on a cargo policy. A warranty means coverage that the insurance will pay, warranted that X happens. And your goods being properly packaged is going to be essentially table stakes for the insurance companies, and it should be from your freight forwarder as well. The next one is a complex and kind of interesting topic, but the carriers or the forwarders that you're using and vetting them and properly and making sure that you're using quality partners. So, for one thing, you're going to want to make sure that your freight forwarding partners or your carriers are going to have the proper insurance. So, that's something that somebody like me can help you with, or somebody else in the space can help you understand what types of insurance should you be looking for. What should you be looking for in your terms and conditions and agreements with those providers? And you can always ask for a certificate of insurance where they're going to show evidence that they have insurance, and then you can see if it's reputable insurance companies and all that. Understanding, of course, that most of those insurance products are going to be legal liability defense products that are going to defend the freight forwarder from paying you, but still good that they have that nonetheless. You're also going to want to verify the competency of your freight forwarder. I mean, ultimately in any business transaction, you oftentimes you get what you pay for, right? So maybe the cheapest rates result in you working with somebody that doesn't actually have your best interests at heart. And in the event of a claim or the loss of a large amount of cargo, you will find that out. And I recommend that when you're considering freight forwarder, making sure you're working with reputable folks. Maybe somebody else has used them. Maybe they've got information on their website. Um, Another great way to see is if they're part of any large associations, such as the WCA, the National Customs Brokers or Freight Forwarders Association. You're going to find that, ultimately, there's going to be bad actors everywhere, but sunlight's the best sanitizer, right? So the folks that show up to these organizations, the folks that show up and really put themselves out in the public are going to be more likely to be better partners for you. Another thing you do is, as we talked about a little bit earlier, is contractual risk transfer. So as a shipper, if you have enough volume, you may be able to have an attorney draft you a contract that's going to be favorable in your behalf. And what you're going to find is you're going to need a significant amount of commercial leverage via freight spend to do this, but you may be able to find freight forwarding partners that are so interested in moving your type of cargo that you may be able to leverage a contract, which is actually going to be beneficial in the event of a claim for you. Last one is, if you're doing shipper load, as in like it's your warehouse, best practices. I see a lot of an unfortunate amount of claims that will occur at the warehouse because the shipper fails to check that the right driver shows up. And right now, unfortunately, we are in a situation where there is just an absolute pandemic of theft and fraud in the supply chain to a level that, frankly, 10 years ago, people probably would have never believed. 5 years ago, never believed. And at this point, we've just grown to accept that there are so many thieves out there. Nobody really knows exactly what to do, to be honest, except for that, insurance obviously is a solution, risk management is a solution, and there's all types of softwares that are coming out. But at the end of the day, it can be as basic as confirming with the logistics company that the correct carrier has shown up because these fraud and theft situations, they thrive in the domestic supply chain, particularly via trucking companies. The trucking market is so fragmented, and I believe they say the largest motor carrier in the US does not have more than 1% of the total market. And so you just got these thousands and thousands of different names. So you're used to dealing with all these small mom and pops and, whatever Joe Schmo trucking companies. So at the end of the day, you don't really know who you're looking for a lot of times. But if you verify by VIN number with your logistics company, is this the truck that was supposed to show up? Is this the driver that was supposed to show up? Still, things can go wrong, but you've done yourself a major, major service by doing that. And the last, which I did put last because again, I really want to push this risk management agenda to you guys, is cargo insurance and transferring that risk. You've got different options. You can buy an annual policy. You could say, hey, I'm going to sell $5 million worth of stuff in these countries, using ocean and air carriers, and somebody like myself or another insurance broker that does logistics and marine insurance can come up with an annual policy, so all of your shipments are covered. If you're a smaller shipper, and what's quite common is that actually your logistics provider and freight forwarding partner will actually provide you with the option to buy cargo insurance on a per load basis. And we're going to talk now quite extensively about cargo insurance. One last thing I want to talk about was a good example of risk management tactics that you can do that, again, I'm not always involved in these conversations, so I don't know all the commercial implications, but, you can see how Incoterms could be something that are used as a way to mitigate risk, right? So if you have X Works, that's over here. That means you're really just going to have the goods at your dock door, and you're going to allow that the buyer of the goods they're going to do all of the arrangement of the transit, and therefore the risk is transferred. You've made your sale, and you don't hold any of the risk, right? So that would be an example of avoiding risk would be X Works. FAS or free alongside ship allows transfer of title and risk to transfer at the origin port. So we've kind of reduced our risk. Sorry, was something there?
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So we've reduced our risk, right? Because on FAS, the risk going to transfer alongside the ship as the goods pass over the rail, I believe. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that. But you've avoided all the risk of this entire supply chain, right? The goods at sea, the goods at the foreign port, the goods going to the warehouse. And then on the other side of it would be retaining the risk, which would be DDP, duty delivered paid. That's going to be where really you're retaining the risk all the way to your foreign customer's warehouse, and likely insuring the goods as well. Any questions on Incoterms and their application as a risk management practice?
We had a whole session on Incoterms, so I think they have enough of that.
Okay, good. And then that's great though, because then this kind of probably lands more about how the application of this as far as protecting your goods. So cargo insurance, hard to talk about cargo insurance without Lloyd's of London. So Lloyd's of London is sort of the birthplace of modern insurance and particularly cargo insurance. So this was a coffee house in London, which became sort of a center of maritime intelligence. So, you know, Edward Lloyd owned this coffee house. You know, it was particularly placed in a situation where many ship captains and ship owners would congregate and socialize. And because of that, it became sort of the place to know about things, right? This was pre-internet. The way information was transferred was, essentially the coconut wireless, right? It was what was whispered down the lane. So if you wanted to find out about maritime endeavors and information, you went to Lloyd's, right? Eventually, the story goes that Edward Lloyd said, "Listen, you guys are making so much money, trading and trading information and getting into these insurance deals at my coffee house. I'm going to make you pay to sit here." Which sort of invented the first insurance marketplace because what was happening was wealthy merchants were making deals with ship owners and ship captains and saying, if your ship fails to come back, I will pay back. And in exchange for that, you will pay a premium to me, which is sort of the first facilitations of insurance products. So some of the history, 1688, Lloyd's was first mentioned in the London Gazette as an insurance marketplace. We could see it sort of formalized. The first edition of a Lloyd's List, which is maritime intelligence being transferred via like a newspaper. In 1811, the Lloyd's Agency, which is a basically a categorized system of different surveyors around the world that could help you survey cargo. That was established in 1811. 1904, the first auto policy was issued. So the car insurance that we are so much more familiar with, taking a debit out of our account every month, it was actually came obviously much later than marine insurance, and it was considered a ship on land, was how it was written, which is quite funny if you think about it. 1912, a Titanic sinks. This was insured at Lloyd's. It was a big deal. And I believe that the policy was paid within 30 days, which would sort of bolstered Lloyd's reputation as a reputable insurance provider. 1986, Lloyd's moved to its new and very modern building in the financial district of London. And 2025, I would just give you an update that Lloyd's is still very, very relevant in the insurance world. I work directly with folks at Lloyd's on an almost daily basis. Epic, we have a program through an insurer at Lloyd's called Beasley. I'm communicating very early in the morning, quite often, with our underwriter there. And London still holds a ton of relevance in the insurance marketplace, and it's still the place to get deals done even today. So what's covered by cargo insurance? So ship sinking, this always surprises people as it does me. 200 cargo ships on average sink at sea each year. Your goods could be on there. General average, we'll talk about. That's a bit of a unique scenario where basically you are asked to participate in the payment of a loss of another based on somebody's goods being lost, and I'll explain that. Earthquakes, 18 per year over 7, that could cause a loss to your cargo. Inclement weather, we had 95 major hurricanes of Cat 3 a year, 5 hit the U.S. alone. Rough handling, just folks in the warehouse maybe not being as careful as they should. Folks on a truck not being as careful as they should. They drop your goods are destroyed. Somebody drives a forklift through your goods. I've seen that one many times. Cargo theft, I see in the U.S. particularly just on a day-to-day basis. It's something that we're just dealing with. Goods are constantly being stolen and then commonly exported and sold overseas or sold here in the U.S. Non-delivery goods just go missing. Pilferage, somebody maybe sees that it's high value goods. They're going to sneak in. They're going to find a way to help themselves. Breakage, leakage, terrorism, and piracy. Still a major issue. Obviously, we have situations going on in the Red Sea. The Horn of Africa is really kind of the hot spot for that always. So there's a few different forms of cargo insurance. FPA, which stands for free of particular average, which is a confusing term for basically partial loss coverage, or sorry, total loss coverage. And then with average is not really very much used. It's really all risk and FPA are the two types of cargo insurance. So you can see all risk is going to be broader coverage, right? So it's going to include theft, non-delivery, water damage, pilferage, leakage, right? Whereas when you have an FPA coverage, sinking, fire and explosion, earthquakes, general average, it's really going to be like extreme situations of total loss. So why would somebody purchase FPA? Well, because the risk exposure is smaller, you're going to end up with a smaller premium. So it can be a cheaper way to cover your goods. Or if you're not really worried about your goods being stolen or damaged, so maybe an example would be like cotton or some type of commodity like grains. You're not really worried about grains being damaged or stolen as much, but you are worried about them falling off a ship or going completely missing. So you could purchase FPA coverage, and also it's going to cover that general average that I'll get into. So another large topic is kind of, well, why do I need to buy cargo insurance? Won't the carrier pay in the event of a claim? And the short answer is yes. The long answer is not in the way you want them to. So when carriers or other supply chain partners, be it a warehouse operator, an ocean carrier, an NVOCC, or an air forwarder, when they're found responsible, which is a key thing, right? Responsibility, liability. Their legal financial responsibility is limited in most cases to an amount less than the full value of the cargo at risk. So the ocean carrier or the NVO, they're going to be protected by the legal statute of COGSA, the Carriers of Goods at Sea Act. An indirect air carrier is going to be protected by the legal convention of the Warsaw Convention or the Montreal Protocol. Truckers are subject to the Carmack Amendment in the U.S. There is no uniform contract, but 50 cents per pound is the standard. Warehouse operators, again, no uniform contract. It's usually about 50 cents per pound as well. I see $1 per pound. And then the customs broker community is going to be limited to $50 per shipment per the NCBFA terms and conditions. And really, if you think about this, it's really the only way to sort of grease the wheels of the global supply chain is to allow logistics operators to be protected by this. And I use the example of a customer of mine, right? They're a domestic freight forwarder here in the United States, and they're going to do maybe $15 million in business, which is a significant amount of business. But ultimately, they're going to have $1 billion of cargo that's going to move under their care, custody, and control, or really that they're going to arrange for. They just simply can't be liable for $1 billion worth of stuff. They would go out of business. Every single logistics provider would go out of business if it wasn't for this system of limitations of liability. So how is cargo insurance premium cost or premium or cost calculated? It's pretty much always on the same formula. Commercial invoice value, the actual value of the goods, plus the freight charges, plus 10%. This 10% is like a max uplift. So in the event of a claim, you're likely going to experience a larger loss than just the commercial invoice value plus freight charges. It also can protect in the event that the value of goods changes while you're moving through the supply chain. So, ocean goods could take 45 days to get from, say India to New York. A lot of times, goods could fluctuate significantly in that. Oftentimes, especially on an annual policy, you'll be able to purchase via sales price, which can be sub for commercial invoice. That way, if your goods are, if you've already made a sale and you're going to lose the proceeds from that sale from the loss, you can recoup for the in total thing. All insurance, be it homeowners insurance, car insurance, or cargo insurance, is charged in a rate per $100 of insured value. The rate by which the cargo insurance costs varies based on the risk exposure. And the primary factors in the risk exposure for cargo insurance are geography and commodity. So in this situation, we've got $100,000 worth of widgets. with a $5,000 freight bill, and the rate is 50 cents. If we do the math here, 100,000 plus 5,000 times 50 cents equals $525 to cover $105,000 worth of potential loss. Any questions on this? Great. Here we can see a nice graph that outlays each intermediary or type of freight forwarder or carrier and what governing terms, treaty, or regulation they're subject to or basically defends them, and then what the financial liability is. So the ocean carriers, $500 per shipping unit. International air carriers, again, it's the Warsaw Convention, $19 per SDR per kilo, or about $28 per kilo. Truckers, the Carmack Amendment, and it's 50 cents per pound. 3PLs or warehousing is going to go down to the actual contract, often 50 cents per pound. And then a freight forwarder, $50 per shipment, or as agreed. Again, talking about FPA and all risks. This all risks plus, I don't really see that often, to be honest. I mean, one example I would say is what's called repatriation coverage. I used to have a freight forwarding client that dealt a lot in the hay business. They were exporting hay, and oftentimes foreign ports would reject the hay, and the repatriation coverage would pay the freight charges to ship the hay back. So it was all risk coverage plus repatriation. Um, FPA terms are going to have the following coverages here. So it's going to cover stranding, sinking, burning, collision, and general average. And I think we're finally going to get into what general average is here in a moment. But first, exclusions. Of course, one of the reasons that people find insurance so frustrating is the system of exclusions. And I personally understand that, but also I think it's worth understanding that exclusions generally oftentimes actually benefit the policy holder, which I get sounds crazy, and feel free to laugh at me about that. But the truth is, it's usually things that are uninsurable or things that would make your policy so expensive if they included it that you wouldn't even want to purchase it in the first place. And it's actually better to sort of separate the wheat from the chaff. That way, an affordable insurance product can be provided. So common exclusions: spoilage, deterioration, yellowing, insects, vermin, latent defect, and mechanical derangement. Um, in this situation, these are non-external causes of loss. Um, all risk also insures against loss or damage that's proven to have occurred during ordinary course of transit. The five commonly exclusions are improper or insufficient packaging, war strikes, riots, and civil commotion. That's actually going to be bought back in with a separate coverage or included a lot of times. Temperature extremes, delay slash loss of market or use, so that the goods showed up late and then you couldn't sell them. That's not going to be a claim. And then inherent vice. Inherent vice is going to be a loss that is excluded because, basically bananas go bad in transit. That's really not a cargo insurance claim. It's not physical loss or damage caused by an external force. Again, there's going to be some commodities that are not going to want to be that are not going to be commonly covered. So cell phones, fresh vegetables, fresh flowers, perfumes, jewelry, bulk commodities, gold slash bullion, empty containers, used merchandise, laptops, computers, eggs, and shells. Those are generally going to be things that are just too risky to be covered. Of course, at the end of the day, insurance is a business, and I've seen all of these things be covered for the right price. So always work with your broker to find out if you can cover something like this. They may be able to come up with a solution for you. And then other goods are going to be commonly insured, but they're going to have special restrictions, or they're going to have higher deductibles. Alcoholic beverages, for example, they may have a higher deductible for theft or breakage. Bagged goods, so say coffee primarily moves in kind of thick burlap bags inside of a container. Generally, there's going to be a higher deductible for bursting of those bags. Um, Marble stone tiles, I've seen those. I did put together a program one time for those, I believe, and they had a higher deductible for chipping and the goods, being damaged in that way. Frozen or chilled products is always an interesting one. They can be covered as long as they're moved in refrigerated containers. And also, they're going to have usually a time deductible. So instead of a dollar deductible, they're going to have a time deductible. So if your frozen or chilled goods may be subject to you proving that the goods were actually subject to over 12 hours or 24 hours of refrigerated breakdown. When does coverage begin and end? So the clause in the cargo policy that defends when coverage commences and terminates is referred to as the warehouse to warehouse clause. It's the intent of the policy to attach at the time the goods leave the warehouse and to continue while the goods are in due course of transit, which can include temporary stops for consolidation, deconsolidation, and to be delivered to the warehouse at destination. So basically through the entire supply chain, which can include temporary stops. That temporary stop is usually limited to 30, 60, or 90 days, depending on the terms of the policy. Okay. And I referenced general average, and I finally got to it. So in this situation, what's the idea of general average is that it's a sacrifice of a few benefited the many, so the many need to pay back the few. At the end of the day, it's a relatively democratic concept. Um, so common examples would be, if there's a fire on board and that fire can be limited to 15 or 20 containers, and they're going to jettison or throw those big containers off to save the rest of the ship. Um, we're going to see a general average declared. So the law of general average is a legal principle of maritime law according to which all parties in a sea venture proportionally share any losses resulting from a voluntary sacrifice or part of the ship or cargo to save the whole or everybody's stuff. To save time and avoid arguments of cargo owners, it was agreed that all cargo owners whose cargo landed safely would be called on to contribute a portion to the cargo owners who suffered the loss in order to avert an imminent peril. So in this situation, breaking down the financial and monetary aspects of general average. So let's say 10 containers, $100,000 a piece were lost. The value of the vessel was $5 million. The cargo on board was $15 million. The total value of the voyage was $20 million. Your value, you had two containers of $200,000 worth of widgets, and they arrived safely. You did not lose anything. But these other folks lost $1 million of the stuff. Well, your proportion of the total transit was 1%, $200,000 of 20 million. So you owe 1% of what was lost, so $10,000. This is a risk that most folks moving containers on ships are not really aware of, I think. I think that it's just a complex concept and it feels very far-fetched. But again, it does happen. And it's a unique situation where, in theory, you really could end up owing more than your cargo even really is worth. So it's actually a pretty high leverage potential risk to your business. And just by purchasing a cheaper product like the FPA cargo insurance, you're going to protect yourself from this loss. Um, so again, I talked about it before, but you can buy insurance from your freight forwarder, and there's some benefits to this. The benefit is to insure the shipment by shipment. In certain situations, you can buy the coverage. You don't have to. You can ease of admin, and large shippers only may be able to get their own policy. Um, what will you need to provide in the event of a claim? An original certificate of insurance. So, how do you support a claim, basically? Original certificate of insurance, the bill of lading or airway bill, the commercial invoice value, the packing list, delivery or dock receipts to verify any exemptions for loss or damage, a statement of a claim, a surveyor certificate or survey report, which the insurance company will help you arrange and will pay for that surveyor oftentimes, any correspondence or reports or information relevant to the transit loss or damage. And I think that it's good to look at a claim as like you're making a case, and the more organized, transparent, and detailed you are with that case, the more likely you are to get your claim paid and get it paid quickly. Um, Claim filing timelines. Each mode of transit has its own timeline. So basically, within 14 days, 14 days for claiming loss or damage for an air shipment, for example. Loss or damage. So on an ocean shipment, written exception should be taken of a time for visible shortage or damage. No mandatory time per claim, but if no written claim is made to the ocean carrier within 3 days for delivery, there'll be legal presumption of delivery in good order. Time for suit, you have 1 year to file an actual suit, 2 years for air shipments, and then each one of these has its own kind of specific framework that you should be aware of. Okay. that was my whole presentation. And that was a lot of information. So I'm hoping that was helpful. And if uh, if folks have any questions or if there's any concepts you'd like me to go back through, yeah, go ahead. I think it's Gregory.
Yeah, thank you. I wish we would have met many years ago.
I love
Uh,
that answer.
there are two issues, please. When I was exporting, I had the shipper get the insurance, so I just paid the shipper. So the cost was something like $350, and it was for in-shell walnuts. And then later, what I learned was it may have been advisable if I was going to do in a lot of shipments per year to have a blanket insurance policy. Basically, I think you refer to it as the all risk policy. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's a there's a cost benefit analysis at the end of the day, so it depends on how much you're shipping, right? Because
Right.
if you're not and for some people shipping 4 containers a year is a lot. And some people say I'll meet people at a conference and they'll say I only ship 4,000 containers a year and I'm like, well, that's a lot. You know what I mean? So what is a lot? I don't know. It's all relative, but at a certain point, it makes sense to get your own policy.
Hmm.
And that just comes down to that's like any cost benefit analysis, right? Every business, right? You can always outsource things or you can do it yourself.
Hmm.
That can be like having an accounting person or hiring an accounting a third party. So it's a cost benefit analysis like anything else, and like any cost benefit analysis, it's subject to the amounts involved and the individual rates. So it's impossible to give an answer of like, yeah, you should have had your own policy. I would just need to know more information, and I would, need to work with the freight forwarder that you're talking about to get an idea of what everything that's going on. For us, we provide the majority of our business comes from providing freight forwarders an open policy and then allowing them to handle the insurance on a case by case. So for us, we always make sure to work with our freight forwarder partners and make sure that we're not, you know what I mean, overstepping them. So if somebody calls me for an annual policy, my first question is, who's your freight forwarder? And if it's somebody I
Hmm.
work with, I ring them up and I'm like, hey, they're reaching out to me. How do you want to handle this? And we come up with a collaborative solution.
Okay, very good. And then the second question is, once a ship arrives at a port, and let's say the port for some reason can't unload the ship, so the ships are backed up, and there's that word demurrage, which I didn't know what it meant till it happened. Who covers that loss of time so that the ship can't be unloaded and there's demurrage costs? Who covers that?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, it's generally not going to be covered under a cargo insurance policy. In that situation, the demurrage is more like I think considered like a cost of doing business. I don't know if Gabe's on, he could talk on that. As it's something constantly freight forwarders are in communication with their customers about.
All right, thank you. And
Any
appreciate
other
it.
questions?
Are we
Uh,
going to be able to get a copy of these slides that this gentleman is presenting?
Yeah, I'm happy to share my slides with you guys. And I'll include my contact information as well in case you guys ever have questions. You don't have to be a client of mine. I mean, I just, my mentality is more like if you just get to know a lot of people and provide information, good things will happen. So you're welcome to consider me as a resource, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. It's another good way to get a hold of me.
yeah,
I wanted
Alex,
to ask you a question.
go ahead.
I wanted to know, see, I sell sugar-free chocolate for people that are diabetic, celiac disease, and tree nut allergies. If I ship my chocolates, I know I need a logistic company that have a refrigerator truck because chocolate can melt depending
Yeah.
on the season. Is it better to probably ship it by air instead of by freight?
Mm. Yeah, that wouldn't be a question for me. That would be a better question for probably the next speaker, which is Gabe, who's actually a logistics provider. That's going to be another kind of cost benefit analysis. But I would say, yeah, I wouldn't be. I would be the wrong person to give that information. Somebody asked for my LinkedIn, and I'm gonna drop my LinkedIn in there, and that's like again the best way to get a hold of me. I spend an unfortunate amount of time on there wasting time, so it's easy to get a hold of me. Um, and then I'll put my contact info too.
Any other questions? Alex, the PowerPoint that we have that I pulled up is a little different from the one you just gave. Could you send that to Sandra?
Yeah, this one I had some late night thoughts. I was like, you know what, I really should include some more information. So
Yeah, that's fine.
I was kind of up
If-
early this morning putting this together. So yeah.
If you could just send that to Sandra, then that will be the one that we will distribute to everybody. I did have a question. The Incoterm determines who has liability at any point along the line. If the Incoterm says the foreign buyer has liability for the ocean side, um, let's see, and they don't get in the cargo insurance. The seller may not know whether the buyer gets cargo insurance or not. What if they don't, and then the goods arrive damaged or something else, and the buyer refuses to pay? What happens in that situation?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in this situation, you're saying that, say our friend, I forgot, did not catch her name, is selling her chocolates to somebody in, China, for example, or, wherever, and she's selling X Works, right? So the foreign buyer is arranging for all the transportation, customs clearance, and you're saying that the goods arrived damaged, but she didn't, that the buyer did not purchase cargo insurance. You're wondering how that would work. Um, I guess I actually would kind of divert again to Gabe on that one. I mean, I would expect that payment would happen at the time of the transfer of title, right? When those goods, like, I wouldn't expect a client to be offering, X Works terms, but then not looking for any maybe like credit or what's the word I'm looking for, a letter of credit or something along those lines. I wouldn't know if that would be normal practice. Am I wrong about that?
I'll jump in.
Yeah,
Go
please do.
ahead.
So I don't. Oh shoot! Did I just freeze?
No, you're good.
Okay. All right. Timing is everything here. So on in a situation like that, it really is important for the exporter to understand the difference between the Incoterm and the terms of payment. And when when the cargo, if you're dealing with perishable goods, um, I would suggest that my suggestion is that you have your own insurance policy. I would approach Alex and say, hey, for all of our transportation in any regards, I want coverage, because inevitably it's going to come back to you whether or not your Incoterm is X Works or DDP. You're It's your product, your reputation, and how you're going to maintain the relationship with your customer. I do have, one of my slides that's coming up here, and we talk about packaging and who's responsible for it. And, in regards to packaging, everything is the responsibility of the shipper, in any Incoterm. And I would say that as an exporter, you would want to know how that shipment is insured, as long as you have not been paid at any point along the process. And if you know that you're going to be paid at a certain point during the process, then you want to make sure you're covered up to that point. Um, and also understand what your buyer is doing. Have they communicated to you that they have insurance? So,
So
Yeah,
Gabe, let
so,
me ask you this question.
sure.
If I have my own personal insurance, which is through Next, I have $1 million general liability and 2 million for product liability. I should also get an additional insurance for cargo, right? So I should
Yeah.
Yeah.
have two.
I can jump in on that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it gets complicated with all the different insurances, but you kind of got to look at your business like a pentagon or something. Like there's all these different sides, right? You've got liability, like, and your company be a food business. Is really a great example because you've got liability for, if people ingest your products, right? And in the United States, we deal in this kind of litigious environment where there's generally lawsuits are going to be tendered at a very high frequency. So that general liability is like you've got a, maybe a storefront, or you've got, just public liability for operating a business. The product liability is actually going to be generally intended to pay claims for if your product causes harm to somebody. But that product liability is not going to cover your goods in transit. Sometimes, to make things even more confusing, on a general liability policy, if you really go through the weeds on it, you'll be able to find some maybe small sublimited coverage for goods in transit, but it's really more for like you moving your inventory around. It's not really going to be like a robust all risk insurance product. But yeah, I would agree. Is it Keisha? Is that how I say your name?
Yes, it says
Okay.
Keisha.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I would, I would encourage you to either have your own policy if you're operating a, small to mid-sized company, or if you're just doing, a limited number of shipments a year, you could work with your freight forwarder partner, and make sure that you've got coverage on your goods in transit.
So work through the freight partnership.
I would think so. Yeah, I would start there. Is what I always would encourage people. Again, the Dell computers of the world, whatever. I'm looking around my house. Samsung TVs of the world, they're going to have their own policies, but the vast majority of companies are not large businesses. It's like a pyramid, right? The vast majority of companies are smaller, and for them, buying cargo insurance with the freight forwarder is going to be the best way to operate.
So would it be the same insurance if I sell on Alibaba or Etsy?
I would have to look at exactly what is all involved there, to answer that. I'm not familiar with those insurance programs.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Alex. We're going to turn now to what might have occurred before Alex's presentation, and that is how you prepare the goods for exporting, the marking, labeling, and all those kinds of things. Our speaker is Gabriel Schwery, or Gabe, as I know him. Gabe is the department chair of global business and entrepreneurship at Santa Ana College. He's a past president of NASBITE, as I was, so we both have rather than old soldiers fade away, they give us a title anyway, past presidents. We're called distinguished fellows of NASBITE, so we continue to serve in that capacity on the board. Gabe teaches logistics at Santa Ana College, but he also owns and operates his own logistics company, freight forwarding company, BG&I. And so he's going to talk about what you do with the goods to get them ready to be put on some kind of a pallet or container. So Gabe, it's all yours, and you got plenty of time. Don't worry about a cutoff point.
All right. Well, thank you, Maurice, and glad to see everybody again this morning. And thanks, Alex. I caught the tail end of your presentation there as I came back from class, and it's always good to make sure that folks understand the importance of the insurance process in the supply chain, and for exporters really being aware of how critical it is to maintaining that integrity and reputation as an exporter. Part of that is going to be reflected now on the packaging part of it, and which is really important. It ties into your need for insurance, and what insurance is going to look at in transit to make sure that what you're doing and how you're packing your shipments, and how the product is maintained, so that your reputation and your shipment arrive in good condition. So just a little bit more about myself as we get into this. Yes, I'm involved in freight forwarding on a daily basis. I'm still connected with my clients and connected with our operation. And I see the challenges of in this particular area of packing and labeling, even at this stage of experience with clients who have been doing this for a long time. And I know that there's really, in most cases, you want to look at, the physical, how you label, how, what do the boxes look like. But I want to present this in a little bit more of a conceptual format of what is it that's important in the process that you should be considering on a higher level, and not necessarily just, what box am I going to use? And that comes to these half a dozen main points that I want to present to everybody. When you're looking at packing and labeling, I'd like you to consider, of course, the integrity and safety of your shipments. I hate using acronyms, but I didn't want to type it all out here. IMO and IATA standards, which are the ocean and air international standards that we're looking at for shipping of goods, including safety, security, the physical packing, material requirements, hazardous, non-hazardous, perishable, non-perishable standards that everybody has to comply with, and limiting the liability through the carriage process in those international terms is different than moving cargo domestically. So there are different requirements and different limitations and different coverage. Regulatory compliance on what you're actually shipping, what materials you're using, what countries you're going to. There are regulations in other countries that would limit your materials that you're going to use, perhaps, or things that you normally would use, you may choose to change going into certain countries or groups of countries. Also, the supply chain requirements, the physical limitation of airplanes, ships, containers, thinking about that before you pack and before you load. It comes to really thinking about the science of packaging and how things are going to move efficiently in that system to achieve the lowest cost and best performance. Distribution channel requirements is very important now that we're dealing with large scale distribution such as Amazon and companies like that. How are they requiring that your packaging comes into their facilities, whether it's here in the US or Europe or Latin America or Asia? Those companies really have an impact on your packing process prior to shipping. And then, of course, the risk management side, which is the insurance side, how the insurance companies, how Alex and his group would look at the validity of a claim if it comes through, or how could your package have been protected better? I see one of the most common responses of carriers when there is damage that it is improper packaging. So that's the key reason it comes through. So you want to make sure that improper packaging is not an issue for your products. I see a hand up. Keisha, do you have a question?
Okay, I wanted to ask you, my packaging and labels, when I put my labels on, I have labels for United States. Am I going to change my labels for international? Am I going to put it in Chinese or put it in Spanish or wherever it's going? Am I going to change my labels or am I going to have half English, half Chinese or what? I don't know how the labels go.
That's an excellent question, and we'll talk about that. You may need to add additional language to certain labeling on the package, whether it's inner packaging or outer packaging, master packs of that nature. And every country has its own requirements for marking and labeling. So products will have, and you'll have to look at that requirement for each of the countries you're going to. Even if you're going across the border into Canada, you do have to realize that there is, there's some requirements for, English and French that are required on your packaging, and at what level depends on their national regulation. I would say on that.
Thank
But there
you.
are certain things that are really standard, such things like up arrows. If you have orientation arrows that need to be on your packaging, or the temperature control, the little penguin with the ice cube on it. You got to make sure that those things are on your packaging to make sure that whether or not your package needs to be cool or frozen or not frozen or not hot, all of those things, especially in your case where you have a perishable item. So,
So is there a list of requirements that we need in
well,
order
it
to,
would,
I don't know if I need the penguin on my packaging from LA or I need to have it,
yeah,
I
I
don't
would
know.
have any kind of temperature control packaging on any shipment going anywhere for your product, period. If you're shipping perishable, you want to make sure that it's visible, visible on the lead package, and visible on each of the overpacks that you're using. Um, because in the shipping process, that's what they're going to look at. If it's on the inner packaging and you didn't put it on the outer packaging, they're not going to notice it, or they may not correlate the paperwork to the actual freight itself. So,
Okay, thank you.
sure. All right. Going to start off by confirming that what I just brought up with Alex on the Incoterm. Under all circumstances, it is the responsibility of the shipper, of the seller, to make sure that the packaging is in order. So it's it's incumbent on you to do your homework before it leaves your dock. And it may require that you have different product packaging for your international shipments. As you make the sale, you can't just pull it out of your regular inventory. You may have certain inventory per country or per region, or just international in general. I know some clients of mine have inventory that is specific for international shipments, and it makes their process more efficient. Whereas the rec, 90% of their product is sold domestically, so that's where they keep, how they package most of their goods, and they just have a separate group managing their international. It may be that as a smaller, startup, you want to look at the ability to either add additional labeling and marking to your shipment along the way as you get orders that come through. Packaging and labeling for integrity and safety. We got to think of some of the basic stuff. That the product needs to be snugly packaged to avoid breakage, and using the proper materials. So one of the things that we see quite often is that packaging materials that we may use here in the U.S. are not acceptable outside the U.S. For example, if you use any kind of wood, making sure that that packing material is acceptable for going outside the country. Wood may not be. Certain styrofoam products that are non biodegradable may be an issue for shipping into Europe. Using that specific information for that market is important, but your items need to be snugly packaged so that they're not moving or shifting. Shifting and moving during the process, you got to figure it's going to be on the ocean or it's going to be in the air. If you're shipping over the road, you've got road vibration, rail vibration, and that will damage the product if it is buffering or moving. We must protect from moisture damage. You got to figure it's going through all sorts of climates. It can be exposed to any potential weather and I just say, moisture, but it is weather damage. And making sure that if you have anything that is tech related, that you avoid any kind of static or electrical damage, magnets, things of that nature that come into contact with packaging, that it doesn't cause damage to your products. All right. So IMO and IATA. IMO is the International Maritime, and IATA is the International Air Freight, Air Transportation Group. And they have certain standards that are in place for packaging and shipping through those means, and they're governed by the international organizations that oversee that and make decisions on what is going to be covered under the safety and security for those shipments. For example, on ocean freight, SOLAS is the safety of life at sea, and it is it is the making sure that the actual weight and dimensions and all of the information that you're providing to the carrier are correct, and will provide for safe loading of that cargo. Dangerous goods handling. It's very important to make sure that you have a dangerous goods handling process. Glad I'm here in my office, and if any of you can see me on the screen, if you've never packaged for dangerous goods, this is the basic of how to package your goods. This is the regulations, and they come out every year. So anything that you might have that can be considered hazardous, whether it's a poisonous, radioactive, corrosive, explosive, any of those types of things must be declared. A lot of things right now have batteries involved. Lithium-ion batteries are everywhere. Those are considered hazardous, and they must be declared, and your carrier's got to know what's happening with those orders. Marking and labeling is critical on the outer packaging, using the designation and language that is required for the transportation. Of course, English is primary, but you're going to need to make sure that you have the right labels, considering whether it's orientation labels or hazardous materials marking or content, including the shipper and consignee labels. Shipper and consignee must be on the box so that we know who is receiving it and who it's going to. And it should also have the transportation bill information, whether it's a barcode or a bill number that's on the documentation. Let's look at talk about regulatory compliance, which is important, more and more important as we look at country standards and limitations. Every country has limitations, again, for how you can package your goods, in addition to what we normally do here in the U.S. You also may require certain language packaging that is required on a per package. Like I was saying, with Canada, we may look at language. It must be in French. If you're going to Mexico, just make sure it's in Spanish. If you're going to other countries, look at their standard requirements for language. Carrier requirements. Every carrier has their own requirement for transporting goods, and it is up to the carrier what they will and will not handle. Sometimes you may be shipping, for example, bulk cargo or a low value cargo, and the steamship line does not want to handle it because the pricing or the service that that is needed to move that cargo is not necessarily going to be offered, or they may require certain packaging requirements if they are going to carry it. Steel coils, for example, they may not want to take those types of commodities. Identification of the boxes, making sure that the pallets or boxes are marked properly with orientation, designation for shipper consignee and transport documents. Usually the lead carton or pallet has the commercial document, which has, packing list or any other documentation, including hazardous copies of hazardous documents as well. Package specification and performance testing. All boxes should be per standard rating. There is a standard UN rating for cardboard boxes. You may see those. I should have put it on here on the on the slide. It's like Alex, changing things at the last minute as we think about it. But there are UN standards for cardboard packaging. So those standards need to be marked on the outside of the box so that whoever is handling it knows what performance level it's at. Again, shipper consignee information and orientation labels, meaning the up arrow is fragile if it's glass, for example, and any temperature requirements should be well noted on the outside of the box. All right. So if we are looking at supply chain requirements, I pulled this information right out of one of the major distributors' supplier requirements. And every major distributor is going to have these types of information, these types of restrictions. Spaces and that you're going to be shipping, automation eligible. Do the pallets meet the minimum quality standards? Can we look at different types of items stacked on the same pallets that have different orientations and heights and things like that? No, that's not acceptable. Can boxes or cases be stacked on a pallet certain ways? Those things are going to be very specific to who your buyers are and what distribution channels they're going to be using. So it's really critical that you look at that particular buyer. They should, if they are a large buyer, they're going to tell you specifically that you have to meet their standards. So if you're shipping your chocolates into a Costco or a Sam's Club, they're going to send you a packet of documents that will give you the limitations and requirements for your product going into their distribution system. All right. So what are their client-specific restrictions for both the retail packaging and the overpacks? Those are the things that you have to look at, and it goes back to the materials that you're buying and sourcing for your packaging. Do they meet the certain shipping and protection standards for the products? Also, they may not accept that shipping labels be on the final retail packaging, so you'll have to comply with overpack requirements, so that if you're doing multiple packages per you may have to do a multiple package per overpack in order to get the product to them to be put on the shelves without any kind of transportation marking on the outside. I mentioned lead carton markings. Usually that lead carton has all of the pertinent information for the entire shipment, so that when it is visible or to a warehouse person, they walk up to that particular box or pallet and pull the documentation right off of the lead document or lead freight, and they know exactly what's going on. And then, of course, cardboard corrugated box testing specifications. They usually require those, like they'll tell you this has to survive a 6-foot drop with, 30 kilos inside the box and maintain its integrity. So you're going to see things like that out of the distribution channel providers. Last thing on the shipping, packaging, and labeling requirements, we want to look at risk management. And it's amazing how creative people get when they want to pilfer your product. You will be amazed at how they can open up a box, remove all of the product, and seal it back up without anybody noticing or seeing for pilferage. We need to look at the integrity of the cartons so that they are not breaking open and providing an opportunity for anybody to pull product out. Marking and shipping cartons should be limited to the minimal amount of information that is provided. So you don't want to be putting, you know, if you're you're shipping Gucci bags, you don't want it to say Gucci bags on the outside of the box, because then everybody knows what you're shipping and how valuable that that product might be. So don't include the detailed description on the outside of the overpack or on the outside of the box that's being transported. I would recommend that overpacks be strapped and banded and shrink wrapped, so that that it's very difficult to access the inner boxes and access the product in a quick and easy manner. The more protection you put on, the better. Also, if you're going through different weather climates, making sure that even though if you're using good quality boxes, that you are shrink wrapping and providing weather protection from moisture and damage from the outside, because you know, it may happen en route, whether it's especially if it's going air freight. You never know where that cargo may be held, if it's on the tarmac and exposed to the weather, or inside a warehouse. So, all right. I did want to get into a little bit about, you know, the export transportation part. It was part of listing on the area of coverage for me, which is involved in the packing and shipping. And I just wanted to get the sort of basics and details of, in these methods of transportation. You got to remember that we are really the only country left using the imperial system. And so we want to look at, I'm going to go back up to the next screen here, because that's one of the things I'm talking about today, is making sure that you understand when you're looking at numbers on your documentation and the requirements of the country that you're going to, you want to make sure that you're all on the same page. And even after 35 years of doing this, last week I came across a case where an operations person was not paying attention to the difference between the metric and the imperial system. And in the end, it cost a whole bunch of money because the information that was transmitted was believed to be in pounds, and it was actually in kilos. And so the transportation costs doubled. Which is not a good thing when you're trying to move product efficiently through the system. And just be aware of some of these key conversions: tons, kilos, cubic meters to cubic feet, centimeters to inches. Remember that we are dealing with a world that is metric, and really, I think you should have that in your mind at all times when you're dealing with an international party. They may not be specific about being metric, but you want to be specific about what they're saying. Okay.
It might not be. Can I have your phone number so I can look it up? 818.
I don't know who's jumping on. Can we meet them? Okay. So some basic technology or terminology, excuse me, as we talk about transportation and how things are going to be packaged for movement, because it will affect whether or not, you know, how how secure things need to be sealed. If you're moving through LTL or LCL, meaning less than truckload or less than container load, that means your cargo is going to be combined with others, and that in transit, there is going to be exposure to possible pilferage. It does happen. With an FTL full truckload or FCL full container load, we're looking at a unit that's sealed on the outside by the shipper and received sealed by the importer. The only people who should be getting into that or breaking the seal is customs. And if they do break the seal, they will put a customs seal back on the container when they're done, so that you know that the only folks who have tapped into that container is customs. Some other things to consider and know, just as you're talking to your freight forwarder, direct consignments versus consolidated. If you're going to be consolidated, that again means you're going to be combined with other freight, other customers, and possible more exposure to pilferage and damage. And then some of the basics, what is the difference between gross weight and net weight? I think, we overlook these things sometimes because we're trying to move too quickly. When we're looking at what we're going to order as far as our shipping units, we want to look at our standard ocean containers that are 20 feet and 40 feet long. Now, that doesn't mean you can fit a 40-foot piece of steel into a 40-foot container. The container interior dimensions are shorter, right? And the amount of volume of product is going to be less than 40 by 40, or excuse me, 40 by 8 by 8. And that comes in at about 67 cubic meters max on the interior of the container. Some of the other terminology that you're going to need to know is it a standard container, or is it a refrigerated container? Of course, Keisha, as you might, as your company grows and you're going to ship an entire container, you're going to want to make sure that's a reefer container and that the temperature can be set at a required temperature for you and monitored throughout the transportation time. Open top and flat racks are other types of standard transport containers that will affect how your product needs to be packaged. If that container is open to the weather, you do need to make sure that even if you're shipping heavy equipment, how is it packaged? Are you protecting from the elements? And what is the standard protection for that product in your transportation? Some choices as far as ocean freight. In most cases, ocean freight is going to be a lower cost than air freight. Not always the case in most cases. Sometimes because of minimum freight requirements and minimum amounts on a low volume, less than container load shipment and LCL shipment, you may hit more minimum charges along the way that might make it more effective to do air freight for either a lower or equivalent cost. And you might as well get your shipment moved by air freight and have it in a couple of days versus a couple of weeks. So things to consider on the ocean freight, making decisions on cost structures and risk. All right, air freight, you're looking at a quicker transit time, but there is space limitations based on what transportation is happening at the time or into that market. You may not have a lot of choice going into a market via air freight. So if you are selling, check with your freight forwarder ahead of time as far as space availability, volumes, how many planes are flying in there? How often are they getting in there? If you're making a deal on moving something that has a time limitation on it, you want to make sure that you can actually transport it in the time frame that that is required. So it may be more effective for perishable and time sensitive and high value products moving by air freight. And there is a bit of security because we're looking at especially in and out of the U.S., security through TSA, as far as there are security standards for all cargo going throughout the air freight system, and how it's monitored, how it's managed, how it's overseen. So there is a level of security there, but it's still loose cargo and subject to damage and pilferage. All right. I spoke about as quickly as I could, and I think I'm pretty close to time's up. But just wanted to say thank you for being here and joining this group. And I'm going to take some questions now. If you have questions on the packaging and labeling requirements that we're all going to need for our orders that are going overseas.
I think a little earlier I had asked a question about what's the best way to ship the chocolate? Should it be air or should it be water?
Well, I've seen chocolate go both air and ocean. It depends on the volume of the order, and I would imagine as a smaller producer, if you're starting up your company and you're shipping, less than a couple of cubic meters of freight, that you would probably want to move it air freight, and you can package that chocolate in insulated boxes, overpacks, that can be temperature monitored, and those monitors can be inserted into the overpack by you at the origin, and can be monitored throughout the process. There is extra cost for that kind of stuff, of course, but you can do it. And I would recommend doing it if you're shipping, high value, high quality perishable products, so that you can ensure that for you and the customer, the product is arriving at a temperature that's been controlled along the way. There are temperature control containers that can go via ocean, but that's going to be for full container shipments. You're probably not going to get an LCL shipment via refrigerated container.
Do they have a container that go by air that's refrigerated like?
They do have standard size containers. I'll throw out some terminology, LD3s and LD7s which are lower deck containers that fit in the aircraft. You have to request them in advance, and they can be rented in advance. There's a price for those, and you can insert a certain amount of dry ice into those containers that will cool the air that is circulating in the sealed container. That's for a large amount of product. For smaller amounts, you might want to put it in, there are corrugated box containers that have insulated reflective material with an area where you can put a coolant, such as amount of dry ice, that doesn't freeze the cargo but keeps the interior temperature cool during transit.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely work with your freight forwarder on getting all of that together, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Gabriel, I have a question. Hi.
Yes.
This is Faisal Ghanim, and we have a small business for skincare products, cosmetic skincare products. So what you presented and what Alex presented, actually, it's too many things to grasp. Definitely.
There's a lot, right?
Yeah, they are a lot. They are a lot. They are like not minor. They are small things to think about, but definitely it will ruin your shipment if you're not aware of what you're doing. So my question is, the forwarder can advise with all these things that you mentioned and Alex mentioned, or how can we get into this information?
Yeah, absolutely. I would recommend starting to work with a freight forwarder of your choice. A lot of times when purchases are made, the buyer will designate their freight forwarder because of the Incoterm. It makes it a little bit rougher on you as far as making sure that you are working with somebody who you can communicate with. So you might want to make sure that your terms are CIF or CNF, something like that, so that you have better control over your transportation decisions. And I would start working with a freight forwarder early in the process to say, hey, this is what I'm shipping, this is what I'm moving, what are the things I need to consider? And we have connections with suppliers for packaging, things of that nature. And also, like Alex was saying, I work with Alex on insurance for clients, and a freight forwarder doesn't sell insurance. We provide extended insurance on our policy to you because we can't sell insurance. That's what insurance agents do. Another technicality, right? But we will work with, if you came to me and said, here's my insurance concerns, I could get on the phone with Alex. We talk about what you're doing. We may even get on a group call and talk about it. And sometimes it's better for you to go through us as a freight forwarder. And sometimes it's better just to go directly through to the insurance company for your own policy. And we work together. There's no necessarily conflict in that area. So, but if you have Incoterms of CIF, that gives you the ability to control the conversation with your buyer and also control how the freight's moving, which is really important.
Okay, and another question. Do you think it's better to, when we're interacting and we're talking with the buyers from outside the US, to send them samples of what they have, to suggest modifications for the packaging that we have? For example, like as you mentioned, maybe we have to add the French language, the Arabic language, the Chinese, whatever it is, and it should be from the outside. It doesn't work if it is in the leaflet, for example. So is it better to send them our products and let them comment and do their recommendations?
Absolutely. Yeah. I work with the buyer, send them a sample if you can, and say, this is how it's currently marked. What are what are the national requirements for this product? And in most cases, they're going to know and they'll be able to tell you. And I would also take a look at their different government agencies and where that information is published. And it's usually accessible from anywhere in the world.
Okay, so they can do the job, or both of us, we can do the job in identifying.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would just make sure that that you're double checking what they're saying, just to make sure, because they may know the standard that they see, but they may not, if they're not regular importers, they may not know what the import markings are. I mean, for here in the US, if you go to US customs regulations, there's an entire chapter on packaging requirements and labeling requirements. So, every country has it.
And usually the forwarder must know, usually, and we do our job in knowing more, just not to have any mistake that will cause us returning the products, maybe.
Yeah. On the labeling side, I would say the forwarder may not know all of the requirements, but they'll be able to help direct you, right? It's the responsibility of the shipper to make sure that the products are labeled properly. So that's really critical. We'll tell you if the outer packaging for transportation is good, but the inner retail packaging is critical.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Will we be able to get a copy of your slides?
I believe that
Yeah, the answer
Maurice
is yes. All the presentations will be that were submitted to us, and I believe they all have been, will be available to all the participants.
Okay, thank you.
Sandra, did you want to elaborate on how that would occur?
We send out a follow-up email. All the slides and the recording are on that email. So if you don't receive anything, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you.
Other questions of Gabe or about freight forwarding or packaging?
Oh, just back on the packaging, to check, you have to go to the customs department of the country.
Yeah, especially for retail packaging, the labeling, the packaging requirement will tell you in country what is required, what language, what information, especially if it's a consumable product.
Oh, thank you so much.
Hi, this is Kathy from UVDI, and I think this might be a question for Maurice, but I remember hearing somewhere that the U.S. Commercial Services has some services to help us understand what the country requirements are for packaging and labeling and all that. Is that still available?
If you go to a counselor of the commercial service, they can contact their counterparts in the country and
Right.
ask them the questions that you're asking. And the chances are that somebody there will be able to respond to that question.
Okay.
Yeah, so definitely make use of the specialists at the U.S. Export Assistance Center in the LA and Orange County areas.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that I would do that. 10 years ago when I knew nothing about what I was doing. We had a $10,000 order, which was the first sample shipment go to Thailand. And we had a great distributor. Everything was going great. And we get the order there and we didn't know that we needed the TISI certifications on the product. And so we had to end up bringing the shipment back. And and the freight forwarder that we were working with at the time apparently wasn't very good because they didn't help us look into that and, kind of protect us for that. But, you live and learn, right? So I figured I would check in the future to make sure we don't run into that kind of issue again.
Yeah, I think your point is not just who can you ask through the commercial service, but now do you find a freight forwarder that knows what they're doing?
That's true too, yeah. Right.
Dave, you have any thoughts about how they can? I mean, obviously you're here and presenting, but if how would they go about identifying a potential high quality freight forwarder?
So for self-promotion, just call me. But in reality, what I would say is, of course, in your market, who I would go to, who is a member of the Forwarders Association, make sure that they're registered as an NVOCC and a freight forwarder with the FMC regulates the NVOs and all of the ocean transportation intermediaries. So you're going to have licensed folks who are available there. Then I would say go to your association networks. LA has a cargo association, Air Cargo Association, and there are available resources there. Sometimes word of mouth referrals for people who are in your similar industries. There are freight forwarders who specialize in certain industries, and they have a lot of experience doing, whether it's high value or perishables. There are forwarders who specialize in each one, and I would ask. Put yourself a list of questions. I have actually a slide from one of my other presentations about what questions to ask for of your freight forwarder. What do they provide and what do they do? What are their major fortes? What areas of the world do they cover? How long have they been in business? All sorts of questions like that. Go ahead and ask, and they should be able to provide you with answers that will either, confirm that they're a good partner or maybe redirect you in another direction.
That would be great if you could share that list with us later, like
Sure.
in addition to your presentation, which was great, by the way. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'll send that over to Maurice.
If you have those questions handy, Gabe, could you send Sandra a copy and she can send them out?
Yeah, I'll pull them out. It's another slide deck. So I've got a couple of slides I'll just pull out. Not the whole thing, just a couple of things on making a decision on freight forwarders.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Gabe, can you tell us what a TISI is?
A TISI?
I believe that's what the young
I can tell you what that is. That's the Thailand Industry of Standards something.
Oh, okay.
Thailand Standards basically is what it stands for.
Okay, thank you.
And it's specific to only Thailand. So someone who hasn't worked with Thailand maybe wouldn't know about it or even think to ask about it,
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of Gabe?
Gabe, where are you located?
I'm here in the LA area, but we're based in Long Beach.
Oh, wonderful. I'm based in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
So I'll take the 110 to get to you, right?
Our facility
It's
is down in
710.
our our facility is in Rancho Dominguez.
Okay, if no other questions, I have a few closing comments.
You said you're in Rancho Dominguez, you're down Wilmington? Oh my God. Okay.
All right. So next week, May 7, is our final session. It's billed as open-ended, but we're going to populate it with some useful information. First, we'll do a recap of all the 7 workshops. What have we covered? What have we learned? Or what should we have learned from that process? Why did we cover those particular topics? We'll get into that. We want you to think about questions that you have not already gotten answers to. You have a whole week to think about it. Formulate your questions. I'll ask Sandra to send out a email asking for these questions, and then you can respond to that email to her, and we will compile all the questions and be ready to answer them. If we don't get any such questions, we may come up with some of our own, but I prefer to get questions from you. Next week, we'll also spend some time on going over what you can get out of the internet that's relevant to what you're doing. We'll do some typical search scenarios. Starting with if you make product X, how do you find your Schedule B number? Once you have your Schedule B number, how do you find statistics on where that product is going? Who's importing it, to which countries? And we'll go through other resources that these are all free resources you can click on to find out, get country information, product specific information about regulations. All of that will be shown to you, illustrating how you can pull up that information for free. That will be also covered next week. The training to come still is, I think you all know that we're still doing the CGBP training, the 2-day boot camp that Gabe will do one day of, and Dr. Ray Bowman, who runs the SBDC network in Ventura County and Los Angeles County, that Simona is part of. Ray will cover the first day, and Gabe will cover the second day. And basically, those 2 days are involved in trying to prepare you for the, I don't know, maybe it's 150 multiple choice questions on the CGBP exam. Now, you don't have to take the exam, but if you want to learn about what a certified global business professional is supposed to have mastered in the areas of 4 domains: global management, global marketing, supply chain management, and trade finance. Those are the 4 domains covered in the CGBP exam. So the training will prepare you for what might be asked in multiple choice questions in each of those 4 domains. And we're very happy that a number of people have already registered for that CGBP training. The first one at Loyola Marymount University, and I think you already have that information. That's in person. And the second will be later, because we couldn't combine them in one day, at Santa Ana College for Chapman University students and any others that Santa Ana can accommodate. That's also free. So look forward to that. Another area of training that Gabe will also do is a 2-day boot camp on freight forwarding. So that's designed to for aspiring freight forwarders. If I want to become a freight forwarder, what do I need to know and be able to do? And it's also for existing staff at freight forwarding organizations who want to, be able to do their job even better than now. So that 2-day boot camp, we have not set the date for, but Gabe Schwery will be conducting that. And another area of training, very practical, and even though it says it's to learn how to become an export management company or intermediary, the very fact of knowing what you need to know to be an EMC is also what you know and need to be able to do as an exporter. So even though it's billed as training to help you become an export management company, which can be one individual, by the way, yourself, it will also cover topics that the exporter themselves or the would-be exporter that may use an EMC instead should know. So that will be coming up. Carlos Sol, who runs an existing export management company, will conduct that training for EMCs. And I think I mentioned that Gabe will also do another 2-day workshop on freight forwarding itself. So all those are in store. Now, I've often said that that training itself does not make an exporter. So a lot of organizations do training and say, well, we've done our job. We've conveyed all the knowledge and information we can about what this is all about and how to do it. And that's it. And I've always maintained that doesn't create exports. It's like, I use the analogy of fishing. You can teach somebody how to fish, which means, if you want to know where the fish are at a certain time of day, and you need to use bait and all that sort of stuff. Here's what you need to know about how to fish, but that doesn't catch you any fishes. In order to catch the fish, you need the rod, reel, and bait and tackle, and that's the assistance part. That goes beyond training. And so that's why we're offering not just training through these workshops, which we've been doing, but we have the Export 101 and Export 201 levels of assistance, where we then take you to get into identify the markets that make the most sense for you, help you develop the proper export market entry strategies, and lead you to the services that the Commerce Department and others provide to help you get into those markets, and we cover all those fees. So that's what this program is really about, not just training, but also assistance.
Maurice, is there a fee to take the test, the written test?
Yes. However, we're covering, I believe we're covering half the cost of the exam fee as well. So not only are you getting the full training to prepare for the exam, but if you decide to take the exam at what we call open window, which follows shortly thereafter, we will cover half the fee. I can't remember what the total fee is. I don't know if Gabe is still on, but we will cover, I think, about half of the fee. It may be $50 or something like that.
The training that Gabe will do, is there a fee for his training classes?
No, all of our training under this grant-funded program is free. So what normally costs a 2-day CGB boot camp, which NASPI does conduct at its annual conference, I don't know, could range up to $1,000 in the 2-day training plus all the training materials. All that will be provided free under our grant-funded program. That's why That's what the grant does for us. Same thing with the training for the export management company and the training for the freight forwarding. All free. And there are no, where we have limits or eligibility requirements for the assistance part of our program. We don't have such requirements for the training part of the program. So all of the training, anyone, not only that wants to be an exporter, but all of the organizations, and there are quite a few organizations that have been dialing into these workshops, all have staff members who might be interested in being trained in any of these areas, and a number of them have already registered for the CDBP training at least. It's open to anybody. The restrictions on eligibility for the trade assistance do not apply to the training. So that is all free, no matter who you are, as long as you're in California.
Gabe,
Okay.
are you still on the line?
Who? Gabe?
Gabe,
Probably not. What was your question?
I wanted to know if I'm doing if I'm selling at Costco's and Sam's Club in the United States, and I want to go sell at Costco's in another country, would I still need Gabe assistance?
Well, Gabe is a freight forwarder.
Yes, he would be
Okay,
the person that
so
I would work through, right?
if you need a freight forwarder to help you with any of the documentation, to help you quote prices, because it may involve transportation costs that you're not aware of to get it from here all the way there, you will want to use a freight forwarder.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions for now? Otherwise, send them in to Sandra after she sends you an email asking for those questions. And we look forward to seeing you next week.